Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. That is Liberty and Friends only on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Cele Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. I'm a bit tired after what can only be described as a very long drive from Johannesburg to Cape Town. But Baruch Hashem, I'm here. And I'm here with you tonight. If you're just joining us at the moment, remember to hit that like button. It's your only price of admission here on the BDL show, hitting that like button. Please do that right now, folks. And remind your friends that Liberty and Friends is on. Good evening. Welcome to it. As always, on Liberty and Friends, we feature a revolving door of key thinkers, opinionistas, and analysts who will help us break down the news week that was by providing opinion and analysis in that regard. This week, we have a veritable mix, a who's who in the house, as we look at various issues, really, that have dominated the news week. Actually, towards the end of the news week, to be honest, which is quite the funny bit. You know, usually I have to troll back in the week to find what got us mad, happy, sad, or whatever the case may be. But most of the stuff has happened in the latter bits of this week. But hey, let me not waffle. Let me bring on my guest tonight. The first guest is a chap who you've seen on this channel. He is the host of the Joe Emilio Show, same namesake. There he is. Joe Emilio, good evening and welcome to Liberty and Friends.
Hello, Cele. Thank you so much once again for having me on the show. I'm very excited for the topics tonight. I'm fuming and rant is loading.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's Joe Emilio, the host of the Joe Emilio Show. Another chap. Quickly do that and put the do not disturb sign on. Sorry about that, dear folks. A call came through, and as I was saying, another fella who is a host, in this case, one part of a trio out at the Manpatria podcast, fellas who do some excellent work out there. Shout out to Dumor Denga if he is watching. I'm talking, of course, about Koketso Resane. There he is on screen. Koketso, good evening. Welcome to LNF.
Yeah, good evening. Good to be back, and I promise to behave. I do promise.
Trust me, the comment section is like you're saying, do not behave. We want to hear exactly what you fellas have to say tonight. Speaking about 1/3 of the trio at the Manpatria show, we are going to have Nzuzo Khati, who co-hosts the show, of course, with Koketso on. He's experiencing a bit of load shedding at the moment, so we'll see him in about 30 minutes or so. Thank you, Andre Derrata, for that delay. A fellow who needs no introduction, really, who went down rather favorably, but controversially last time he was on the show. There he is, Kanthan Pillay. Good evening, Kanthan. Welcome to LNF.
How's it, Cele, and how's it, guys? I must point out that I'm probably the only person on this lineup tonight who doesn't have his own podcast. Or I should say their own podcast to keep up with identity politics. Sorry, my bad.
Well, I was about to say, few of us on this lineup can claim to have actually helped start a whole broadcast channel, news network. So there you go. We stand in your awe, if anything, here on the show. Good evening. That is Kanthan Pillay. And of course, last but not least, Gabriel Crouse. There he is from the Institute of Race Relations. Gabriel, welcome to LNF.
Oh, man. So good to be here. So good to be back. Yeah, bo.
Excellento. Guys, let's hop straight into it. But before we do that, I'm sorry, I'm just having a look at them likes. Guys, my likes are nowhere near where they should be. Let's keep that engagement, please, at 50% above. So if there is 100 people watching, let's have 50 likes, please. 50% engagement, or I will pause the show at very awkward moments. Guys, get my likes up. Hit that like button right now. Moderators, a reminder to you, please, to keep the chat on topic and keep it clean, keep it classy, people, and let's get those comments in. Remember, this show is interactive. You are a part of the show. The comments and your views will be flighted periodically on the screen. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Fellas, let me begin at a place which I think it touched me deeply because it really affects the one part. I talk a lot, as BDL of my values, the notion of standing for faith, flag, family, and freedom. And this week, the Moti family out in Limpopo are absolutely going through hell at the moment with their 4 children having been abducted, kidnapped effectively. Now, there isn't much information coming out purposefully on their side. They're sort of saying they're letting law enforcement deal with this and they don't want to jeopardize the investigation. But Kanthan, there's a family right now that is just reeling with 4 of their children missing.
The interesting thing in terms of this, Cele, is that we haven't actually started asking the questions in terms of why so few of these actually make it through into the public domain, which for me is actually the far more interesting question to actually be asking. So if I look at the figures that come from the Institute of Security Studies, we've got for the period of April 2019 to March 2020, there were 6,630 kidnappings. Now, if you break that down on a per day basis, but also the 6,630 kidnappings were in fact a 16% increase on the previous year. So, if you think about it, this is an opportunity crime, which against the backdrop of a complete lack of any sort of capacity in terms of forensics around DNA testing and all of those things, and just basic law enforcement. It means that this proliferation of these particular types of specific crimes are going to continue to increase at a vast level. It turns out that kidnappings end up being frequently linked to things like car hijackings, and more often than not, the kidnappings are then at a level of you hijack the car, but you don't just take the vehicle, you take the person and then use them to lead you to where they happen to live, and then you clean out the house and all of that kind of thing. The Moti scenario is, clearly looks far more sophisticated, far more planned, probably at the level of involving international syndicates, which, and they are there because they have this ability to go to specific countries and target high net worth individuals, which Moti owns one of the biggest car dealerships around, and clearly has been in that business for a while. But let's just leave those numbers, let people sink in. Take those 6,600 kidnappings per year, translate that to the number of kidnappings per day, and flip, we've got some scary stuff going on.
Absolutely. And it really is frightening. And, Kanthan does the right thing by bringing up those numbers, because I was also going to dig into them. And one of the questions I asked you fellas in the sort of waiting lobby was, this is clearly a crime trend which, whether it's international syndicates or local opportunistic criminals down here, are seeing as a viable tool to make bank, clearly. Gabriel, I'm going to come to you and then Koketso. And the question I asked you guys is, are we becoming almost like a Mexico now, where, more elite, wealthier people, for example, need to now hire bodyguards and, private security to shepherd kids to and from school, for example?
Yeah, I think in some way we've been there. I remember when I was in high school, I had a wealthy friend who lived in Northcliffe, and his dad started one of the upstart banks, and they had a driver who would come pick us up from boarding house and take us to Melville for a few drinks, and then pick us up again. That was very nice. But the driver was packing heat, and was ex-armed forces, and had on 2 occasions, even by then, and this is in the 2000s, had to resort to force in order to defend the family. So, and likewise, if you go into rural South Africa, the stories abound. People really live in the wild, wild west. It's the deep, deep south. It's just the reality on the ground where if you have something, especially, you need to take care of it yourself, because you're not going to get any help. from the states. And even if you're a hardcore libertarian who wants as little state intervention as possible, the one thing government is supposed to do that everybody can pretty much agree on is guard the bodies of ordinary folk. And that's just not happening. So people have to do it themselves. I think what we're seeing here is a kind of technological and entrepreneurial leveling up. So you have this playing around with like people who through strange personal social circumstances are particularly exposed, or because they're in rural South Africa where the police, I mean, here's another fun stat, this time coming from SAPS itself. In rural South Africa, I think it was over 60% of people said that you could expect the police to come to take more than 45 minutes to answer a phone call. And it was something like a third to somewhere between a third and let's say 35% said that the police would never come. So you know, there you really are. It's the state of nature, as Hobbes would call it. But in the urban centers, we've seen a growth of that. This is not a case of that, but I think that's part of where those stats come from. And coming from Stats SA, you know, in Joburg, sort of Bedford View area has become quite a kidnapping hotspot. And I think this is a logical progression. This is what happens when you have a police force that's inept and corrupt, even when it does show up. And entrepreneurs, you know, entrepreneurship is a funny word. Really, what an entrepreneur should be is someone who's obliged by the system to make something by adding value. But when that's not the system, people that are go-getters, that are high energy, they end up doing this kind of stuff. And I don't see a turnaround. In fact, I see it getting worse, precisely because of, again, to use the entrepreneurial analogy, you know, the first guy who starts selling cell phones is quite a difficult thing to break into the market. It's a new idea. People are like, but can't I just use a Tiki box or a phone at home? But once it becomes a thing, then more people are like, well, this is a model that works. Let me take it up. So I think the trend is moving in the wrong direction. And for it to change, you'd need someone very much unlike Becky Cele to be in charge on the ministerial level. And at the sort of police itself level, let's remember Jeremy Veery and company, some of the best police officers have been ousted effectively by top brass that are afraid of good police doing their job, and so exposing them for being the useless, corrupt kleptocrats that they are. So we're really moving in the wrong direction on a lot of fronts.
You know, unfortunately, you paint a picture which is a grim one. One which, if someone like Ian Cameron or you know, Gideon Joubert, shout out to Ian Cameron of Action Society, pardon me, and Ian Cameron, pardon me, and Gideon Joubert, Paratus.info, who we had last week on the show, they would listen to something like that, Gabriel, and they'd immediately say, you know what, actually, with that being a deteriorating trend and moving in that deteriorating trend, actually, the impetus is now on the individual, the impetus is on families to look after themselves. Koketso, let me come to you, because even as I say this, I know I introduced this topic to Gabriel by mentioning, you know, will it now necessitate the wealthier families? Gabriel saying it's already happening, you know, shepherding kids with bodyguards, or even those of us who are just in the middle class, maybe involved in riskier jobs or whatever the case may be, hiring a night guard, for example, to man your gate in the evenings, or whatever the case may be. Are we heading for that man on fire type society? If you remember that movie with Denzel Washington where he plays the bodyguard looking after the kid in Mexico.
Yeah, look, I think we are heading there if we're not already there, like Gabriel has just mentioned. Again, very unfortunate what happened to the Moti family here. We don't wish this sort of thing on anyone. Of course, even as a parent, you know, you have a duty as a parent to ensure the safety of your children. Unfortunately, you know, and we've mentioned this before, in that where does our tax money actually go when it comes to now having Treasury allocate large sums of the budget to actual policing? If you lay this against the backdrop of the police's budget being reduced, effective this year going forward, why is it being reduced if we're actually sitting with situations like these where people are being kidnapped, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, not just in urban centers, but even out in some of the rural areas. I think it's also very unfortunate that we know that perhaps the Moti family do have some form of means to, in the event that the police should fail, they might just have the resources to actually take this a step further and engage some private industry options. But not every South African has that option. And unfortunately, those who are going to be losing out on their well-being are the poorest of the poor. So, I mean, think about all these political promises that particularly the ruling party is very guilty of, in that they promise to, they promise a better life for all. In which version of a better life for all of us does you having to worry about whether your children are safe or not? Is this applicable? Someone needs to actually hold these guys to account, but especially more than anything, why does Cele still have a job even at this point in time? What's going to happen is we have a situation with the Moti family where this is actually a solid case study to see how the police can actually, kick into gear when is necessary. And unfortunately, even if it does come out with the best results for this, what about the other 6,000 plus families or individuals that are involved that Kanthan mentioned? Nothing has been said of there. And again, I'm going to point fingers at the media for being complicit and not telling the story out there and not holding our police to account. It's unfortunate that after now apportioning parts of your tax money, hopefully to get some form of policing, you have to go the extra mile as a parent, as an individual, to actually protect you and yours, not just your property, but right down to the bodies that include your sons and your daughters. It's very unfortunate. And yes, we are heading to this scenario where we can find ourselves being exactly like Mexico, where those who enjoy a standardized, decent quality of living are those with enough money to actually, not only invest or pay for leisurely activities, but can also afford to be quote unquote safe. And that's not the world we kind of want to live in.
Joe, I'm going to come to you, but I want to introduce something extra to this particular topic. And then after Joe, Kanthan, I want you to chime in, because I think your initial statement and the hunch behind it is proved by this particular story that I'm going to raise now. Speaking about kidnapping, fellas, I scrolled. You'll remember the previous week, we spoke about the 500 or so Ethiopian nationals who were kidnapped, and the one suspect, that was in Lenasia, and the one suspect was in custody, of course. Just as we were digesting that particular story, again, involving Ethiopians, the headline in, what is this? Pardon me. The headline in Times Live. Police rescue 11 kidnapped Ethiopians from a Johannesburg, once again, storage facility. Now, when I initially read that headline, I was like, oh, but this is an old story. But no, this is a different case now, where Western Cape detectives and their Gauteng counterparts have rescued 11 men from a storage facility in Meadowlands during a raid on Friday. That was Friday last week. Police spokesperson, blah, 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 said these men were kidnapped from different parts of the Western Cape. And of course, there is suspicions here of an extortion ring in this province. And 2 men in this particular instance were arrested. End of quote. Joe, there's something, I don't know how to express it into words, but it's frightening. If you think to yourself, okay, not only do I now face the criminal, the petty mugger who wants to just take something from me, there are now criminals who actually may want to take me, myself. I may become that missing person who then a family member gets a call about needing to pay X amount for me to come back home.
Yeah, I think the words human trafficking come to mind, and as much as we don't want to talk about this topic, I don't know why. But even Herman Mashaba was on my show discussing this troubling issue that we have in South Africa. He was not exactly 100% forthcoming. I think he may be a bit worried about, naming outright the people behind it. But he seemed to have known and seen the seedy, disgusting underworld that exists not just in Joburg but across South Africa, and it's a real problem. I think one thing that Herman Mashaba said is that 100% the ANC and some other politicians from other parties are behind it, and he was adamant to say that the politicians are all protecting. It's like a one big syndicate where cops are involved, politicians are involved. It's big money making things, and foreign nationals as well, like Nigerians are also involved. South Africans are involved. He said it's one of the things he's trying to put an end to. But he's a politician as well, so I don't know if you can really, trust him on that. But he's one of the few politicians that actually are speaking out about it, and it is worrying because at any moment, you, me, anyone sitting here, our children, at any moment can just be snatched up, and it's scary, very, very scary to think what they'll be experiencing.
But I mean, Kanthan, that exact point, there is that, as you mentioned, that international element to this, which worries me a little bit because, we're far behind to an extent. The sort of sophistication we're seeing from these human traffickers, for example, who operate around the world, where there's trafficking girls into Europe, from poorer countries, or, South America, where we see this involved with the drug cartels, blah, blah, blah. I can go down the line. This really does worry me, though, in the sense that I don't think SAPS is on top of this.
Cele, one of the things that I keep trying to get people to do, and this is actually an object lesson for us to be doing right now, is to actually zoom out and see a bit of a big picture in terms of where these things actually originate from. And take this back to the fact that we probably have the most porous borders in the entire continent in terms of people being able to get back and forth. So once you have that scenario where you have a combination of porous borders, you have corrupt Home Affairs officials, because remember, that's the reason why we now need visas to get into the UK, because our passports are no longer trustworthy. So you've got that combination of corrupt officials, of porous borders, and then a complete breakdown in terms of the intelligence services that exist in our country. So that actually leaves opportunity for South Africa to become headquarters for all sorts of vested interests in exile. So case in point, consider that we've had Rwandan politicians assassinated here within our borders. Okay? Consider the fact that there is a major war going on currently in Ethiopia, and people from opposite sides of that conflict are actually fighting that war outside of their borders. So again, take that back into the situation that we have here right now. We have the scenario in terms of Eastern Europeans who are hanging out in the greater Ekurhuleni area at large, and a spike of kidnappings that happen out there. We have the Russian influence in terms of nightclubs in Cape Town, and again, we've seen a bloody trail that actually goes on out there. So none of these things can actually be addressed at the level of singling out a particular segment and saying this is how we fix it. This rot goes all the way to the top in terms of the African National Congress administration, and until such time as there's actually political will there to do something, it's not going to happen. I remember back during the late 90s, during the time of the Planet Hollywood bombings in Cape Town, when I was managing editor of the Cape Times at the time. And I had very close contact at the time with a range of the diplomatic corps, and I got to speak to people from the U.S. State Department, and who told me at the time that the U.S. State Department actually had more people on the ground in the Western Cape than the rest of the continent combined, because they were so concerned at the time of the threat of Islamic fundamentalism that was emerging out there, that they were actually gathering as much intelligence as they possibly could. Now, we've got a government right now that actually refuses to engage at any meaningful level with the Western world in terms of their intelligence, because we know that certainly the Western world has got intelligence on the ground out here. I guarantee you that Israel too has intelligence on the ground out here. And all it would take is actually a little bit of diplomacy and cooperation with those countries to actually share intelligence and actually make a determined effort to root this out. Because effectively, this becomes a global problem. Because the lack of competence on the part of our government in this country means directly impacting on democracy in Rwanda, directly impacting on democracy in Sudan, directly impacting on democracy in Kenya, directly impacting on democracy in Ethiopia. I could go on and on. So big picture stuff. Again, where do you start to unscramble this omelet? I don't know. But I do know that the quickest way that we can actually start addressing this, we need to have more substantial cooperation with the Western world's intelligence services. I'm very clear about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a recent case here in Cape Town, sorry if you mentioned it, involving Nigerian scamsters, and fraudsters is a key example where it was the Secret Service, the U.S. Secret Service, pardon me, that was instrumental in helping catch those counterfeiters, because obviously the Secret Service also deals with counterfeiting of the U.S. currency. Speaking about counterfeit, I don't know if I'll be able to make this link. Never mind, I'll let it go. My likes, people, get my likes up. Also, I'll call the Secret Service on y'all and have you guys arrested. Get my likes up, people. Remember, I want that 50% engagement. So if there's 100 people watching, let's get that 50% likes. Whether it's a like or dislike, I do not care. Keep my engagement up, people. We're at that 30-minute mark. This is Liberty and Friends. I'm your host, Usihlengo Bese, a.k.a. Big Daddy Liberty. Who do we have in the house today? We have, of course, Kanthan Pillay. There he is in the bottom, having made a very good point on the need for international cooperation. That's Kanthan Pillay. Gabriel Crouse from the Institute of Race Relations. He's also one half of that duo at Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree podcast. Make sure you give them a like and listen to their content. And of course, Nango, there he is, Koketso Resane, 1/3 of the trio out at the Manpatria podcast. Last but not least, there he is, Upra Joe, pointing out to Koketso over there, Joe Emilio, the host of the Joe Emilio Show. In a few moments, not more than 6 minutes, we'll be joined by Nzuzo Khati, who unfortunately is still enduring load shedding, but he'll probably join us. There he is. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. There he is, Nzuzo Khati, on your screens right now. Nzuzo, good evening. Welcome to LNF.
Evening, guys. Sorry, guys, for being late. Sorry to the viewers for being late. This is it. This is the life that we live, unfortunately. But yeah, glad to be on the show.
I was about to say, we can tell, Humi, your background is still quite dark. You look like you're telling campfire stories, horror stories over there. But welcome to it, brother. It's good to see you on the show. And I think your timing is perfect, Nzuzo, because I do want you to introduce the next topic that we're going to chat about, which is Cele is quite clearly gunning after the private security industry in this country. I'm talking, of course, about the, I don't know if it's now been signed into law, but the Private Security Industry Regulation Amendment Bill. I think it has actually just been signed into law. This law, effectively, one of the dangers of it, but I'll let you lead the charge, is effectively through law, security-related businesses will at least now have to be 51% Black-owned or SA-owned. And there's quite a few other provisions in this which are a bit dodgy. But Nzuzo, why should we worry about this particular piece of law?
Well, yes. Firstly, Cele, like you said, it essentially puts the ownership of these companies in the hands of the minister, particularly the council that the minister has now created through this legislation, through the Private Security Regulation Amendment Bill. And yes, like we've seen in other parts of industries, such as the mining industry, such as the agriculture industry, when government gets involved, it becomes all bureaucratic, and it becomes bureaucratic as well as corrupt, and industry starts being unproductive in nature. And then also another thing is that this bill also has created a council. So being in the legal fraternity myself, we've been through this ourselves, where in 2014 there was a bill called the Legal Practice Act, and through it the Legal Practice Council was created, which was essentially a puppet of the government that we have today. So it's essentially a puppet of the Justice Department, and in which it now regulates all legal firms within the country and how they governed ownership, BEE, you name it, all types of unproductive regulations which have implemented. So the case is the same with the private security amendment bills, in which a council has now been created where all private security industries, whether it be event security, whether it even be locksmiths, that also, your regular locksmith, your small businesses, those type of businesses are also regulated by this bill. And so they must all have registration, or the registration must be done through the council, which is essentially a council which the minister appoints. He essentially appoints the board of directors, which is obviously who will be his puppets, of course. But nonetheless, it creates a whole bureaucratic system in which many of these businesses have to, disciplinary measures will have to be taken via this council. Registration has to be done via this council. If you are seen to be not in line with the policy, government policy, police ministers' policies, such as BEE, such as ownership rights, then you're gonna find yourself being visited by inspectors of this council, who are gonna essentially come down on anyone who does not adhere to their policies, which essentially are created by Cele. Cele essentially has the most power in this whole amendment bill. It gives the ministers powers to appoint anyone on the board, appoint anyone on the disciplinary board or the disciplinary tribunal. Policies which are created are done through this council. And what I've seen, Cele, and to the viewers and the guests, is that I've seen this happen in legal fraternity. It becomes bureaucratic. It becomes slow. You'll wait years for disciplinary hearings to be done by the minister, by the council itself, and you just have too much bureaucracy, too much interference, too much, and not enough private sector industry players who are able to actually take the industry forward. And then it becomes a case of, it slowly becomes a case of, if you don't have enough black people, if you don't have quotas, if you don't have ownership rights, which put South Africans, essentially black South Africans, it can even go to the extent of saying no foreigners can be part of your board of directors of your company. It can go to that extent. It puts a lot of powers in the minister's hands, and that's the thing that we do not want, especially a ministry like this, such the police department, which I've seen in the past few months that have destroyed. That has been a department that's in a terrible state. It can't even do its basic function of protecting its citizens, and it intends to do the same. Though it does this through amendment bill, it will not help in any way possible to actually improve the private security industry. Private security industry is going to become more expensive. I fear that many people who are now going to look at private security firms, which will be done through. Many citizens are going to be looking for private security firms to secure their neighborhoods after the event that we had a couple of months ago. Will have to pay even more fees, premium fees, because now what it essentially says is that if you, as a private security company, you must pay levies to this council. As this council is now going to be created, you have to pay levies to this council, and a whole lot of fees that are going to have to come into it. And of course, as we know, the market needs the charges need to be taken on by someone else who's able to pay that, and it's most likely the customers. And unfortunately, South Africans are going to have to pay even a heftier bill for the security services in their neighborhoods.
Kanthan, I'm going to come to you and then Gabriel, because the initial reasoning for why this bill was required, this is all the way back in 2014 when Minister Mthethwa, Nathi Mthethwa was the police minister. He would flap his gums and wax lyrical about how, this was a threat to our sovereignty. That is the rise of the private security industry in the countries. It's a threat to our sovereignty, he argued. At the time, he basically said, where there is 446,000 private security officers to 220-something thousand police officers, you can see this is a threat to our democracy. But clearly, this is just a fig leaf for more control over the private sector, Kanthan.
Yeah, it certainly has been the case. But essentially, this has been part of an overall campaign to disarm the populace of the country. And so if you look in terms of recent attempts in terms of legislation as well to try and undermine private firearm ownership for self-defense, which frankly, for the majority of people in this country, is the only reason why one would actually carry a firearm. And, I'm not discounting those who carry firearms for hunting, which I entirely support. But, by and large, for most of us, the only reason we would acquire a firearm is for self-defense. Now, when by legislation the ANC tries to remove the ability for private individuals to carry firearms, then that is a warning bell, because the first thing that you do after disarming the populace is that you then have the ability to expropriate at gunpoint, and the populace has no way of actually defending themselves. So these are all a steady chipping away at the ability of the populace to defend themselves, whether it be in the level of self-defense in terms of firearms, whether it's at the level of private security companies, whether it's at the level of your being able to provide for your own health care in terms of the National Health Insurance Plan. All of these are chipping away at individual liberties so that you become increasingly dependent upon government's largesse, which ultimately leads to control. And I think that if you want to summarize, that's where the big picture is. But I just wanted to ask Nzuzo a question based on the breakdown that he just gave us. What is the scenario in terms of our obligations in terms of the World Trade Organization? Because surely anything that is actually preventing outside businesses from coming in here on an equal footing would be in violation of those international agreements. What do you think?
Oh, okay. Kanthan, let me just preface this by saying I haven't actually looked that far in World Trade Organization, but off the top of my head, there wasn't a situation where I think it was Ibrahim Patel, who is now, how I know is that, the World Trade international organizations across the world, they have a limited function on how you govern your country. So in South Africa, essentially how we govern our country is through the laws that are created in South Africa, and we recognize international laws. However, it's only in cases where our law has not been developed to the point where, for example, you have a case and so you cannot necessarily there's no law that actually applies to such a case. Then you're going to recognize international law, such is the case with Sanlam. Sanlam's now fight against all these companies that have claimed money from them for the past 18 months due to COVID. They've used international law to come and decide that Sanlam has to pay them. So the World Trade Organization is going to obviously to raise its red flag against this. But even if they do, what was the case even with Ibrahim Patel when you wanted to essentially restrict foreign trade, South Africa's trade with foreign players? It's still allowed in terms of our law to do so because the Constitution essentially recognizes our legislation as paramount on top of international legislation. So you can be part of the World Trade Organization as a country, and you can get penalized for laws which are not in alignment with the World Trade Organization, Trade Organization's principles or values. However, our law is still paramount. Our law still prevails, and most likely, as is the case, which I've seen with the ANC government, it's a straight up, screw you to everyone else who thinks they can actually interfere with the ANC's laws. They're going to push through their policies, and I think ultimately we're going to have to. Ultimately, the World Trade Organization is going to really have to. I think they're going to come second to the ANC's policies. That's just my
let me interject
my opinion. Yeah.
Let me just interject in Nzuzo, because I think the point Kanthan raises is an important one. Because part of, if you remember back, part of the who objected to this bill, besides the actual industry itself, the private security sector, were unforeseen guys such as embassies in this country who were saying, hang on, South Africa has ratified the WTO's General Agreement on Trade in Services, and I think it was the AGOA at the time was that's the African Growth on Opportunity and Opportunity Act. If you remember that bill that was passed by the Americans seeking to open up trade and preferential trade to African countries, and the Americans themselves were some of the loudest voices saying, "Hey man, if you go down this route, you will jeopardize your ability to be seen as an investment destination. But the ANC again forged ahead, as Nzuzo said. You know, that hard-headed approach that we know best. Gabriel, let me come to you very quickly, because there was another angle that I just I sort of remember being sort of part of this argument back then. You know, there's this notion that Minister Mteto, again, I keep mentioning Minister Mteto because he was the minister at the time when this bill was proposed. And one of the arguments he made, Gabriel, was to say, well, actually, the police have a lot that holds them accountable. There's a lot of scrutiny on the police, he argued. But there's no scrutiny, he argued, on the private security industry. And here was the kicker, one that made me laugh as a classical liberal. He went on to say, the only scrutiny they have is the market, which basically, it's laissez-faire, he basically suggested in his misinterpretation of that expression. But actually, the market is a much better discipliner of behavior than clearly we've noticed, politicians.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think, just as it happens, you're right about when it was drafted, and it was signed into law by President Ramaphosa just a couple of weeks ago. So it's not like the ANC's changed its tune on this one. There's two angles here. Before I answer your question directly about the market's ability to drive security, there is this question about the relationship to foreigners, because this is, the sort of headline thing is 50% local ownership, foreigners got to relinquish that control. As we were discussing in the first topic, we do have a terrible problem with porous borders, corrupt Home Affairs officials, and the breakdown in rule of law that results therefrom, and especially our how we position ourselves then as a kind of HQ for global international corruption, pave our way for human trafficking, all kinds of terrible things. So we've got a thing to do when it comes to international relations, that it's about guarding our borders. But on the other hand, so we're not doing anything about that. What we are doing is we're trying to say to people who are like, here's some capital that I'm going to invest in your country that's going to grow jobs directly, and that's going to contribute to people's lives and livelihoods, because the service that's being rendered is protection from theft and murder and so on. That's what's pushed up against. That's just insane. And the insanity, I think, going back to 2014, was in a sense connected to also that drive to say that foreigners shouldn't be allowed to own farms. There was a similar proposal for cap on ownership there. And it just took, I think, South Africans' frustration with law and order and our porous borders, and really does kind of turn it into, if it's got any sense at all, a kind of xenophobic stupidity, an imprudent thing that just makes things worse on every level. So in that sense, this amendment is pretty grim. And it's funny that Ramaphosa is the guy who signed it, because he's the New York Times darling, right? He's the guy that Beyonce comes and sings with, and like we have a jewel at the Calabash. He's like Mr. Grand Sol into South Africa internationally, friends of the first world, and he's like, but you guys can't come and invest your money here. It's crazy. In terms of whether the market's better than the state, I think this is an interesting clash point, because one of the things that I try and do in terms of like zooming out, like Kanthan was saying, is look at how different countries have different problems, and so the solutions are going to look different as well. Now, that sounds about as common sense as you can get, but you don't hear it a lot in the big leagues. South Africa is in a very unusual place. In most countries, the police just are the best at guarding lives and livelihoods. And it's extraordinary wealth. You imagine a bank, it's like a huge pile of money piled up there. So you need an extra thick floor. So they'll have the vaults and the permanent guards and so on and so forth. Because part of their value add is adding more protection than the baseline. But the baseline isn't zero and it isn't negative. It's like you're quite likely to be able to walk around at Central Park or some rural sort of farmland, whatever. And just enjoy yourself. Look at the stars. That's really an extraordinary privilege here. So we're in a different world where, usually I think the state is very well aligned to doing its job properly. Proud police, proud soldiers, they can get their act together in a way that really protects. Here we've got a different problem, and so we need a different solution. I think that the provocative question is whether the government should offer tax rebates on, most people's solution is to just buy into a private security company's protection. Should you get a rebate on that? Should you get a rebate actually on buying a gun for self-defense? If for the training that should go with that. I think especially in terms of the private security, my initial answer when I was first talking with people in the industry about this a few years ago was no. Like, I see your nice idea, but you're kind of exacerbating inequality in an unhelpful way. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but this particular way kind of seems to do the wrong thing. I think things have gotten so much worse. The July riots kind of changed my view on that. Like, the more private security companies there are, they're not just adding value to themselves. It's like an umbrella that covers a broader group. You want to be in that community, so you want those to mushroom. And this easy, one thing that every government in the world should be able to do is offer a tax rebate. Like, it's not complicated. The paperwork's pretty straightforward. You're immediately injecting money into the economy, and I think with a great multiplier. So there's a policy shift that I've made in the last 4 years about how seriously I think our government is useless. I mean, I live in the Joburg CBD half the time, and during the riots, we saw the police come and then run away from the gangsters. And in the days around that, it was totally the community like sticking it up that made things livable. And I think they deserve a high five. But I think more than that, that's a model to grow on. Get a rebate so that you've got more jam in the jar to actually grow this model.
And that's the funny thing here, guys, is that South Africans have shown a fantastic knack at being able to take charge of their own destiny, their own services, when the situation demands it almost immediately because of some emergent issue or an emergency itself. I'm going to come to you, Koketso, because I think it's something we've actually chatted about before, 2 or 3 shows back. It's funny to me that it is those amongst us in society, the political elites, who have the most access to safety and security by way of private bodyguards for themselves, or SAPS bodyguards for themselves. And I can go down the line insofar as they never go without. My rights born. But it's for those of us who don't have that privilege, that state privilege, if I can call it that, who are literally further limited by the very people who have argued never go without themselves. Is that not just the irony of this entire situation? A guy who will look at you from behind, bodyguards, saying, no, you don't have a right to private security because I should control them.
Yeah, I actually find it disgusting. And I mean, with that said, you have to consider how, if we look at, these proposals for national health insurance are laid out. The reality is we sit at a point in time where the state can't actually effectively deliver quality, accessible healthcare to everyone. And everyone, I mean every single citizen inside of the country and those who aren't necessarily citizens but are inside the borders. The state can't do that. The solution then is, guys, invest in private health. As soon as you earn enough, one of the first things you should probably consider is getting some private health, so that should you be on the N1 in a car accident and your body is laying there in need of urgent medical attention, the paramedics will take you to a private hospital where you will receive immediate care. Rinse and repeat the situation now for security. Those running jokes about how in the time it takes for police to actually address your phone call, let alone actually attend to your case or open up a case, the time it takes to actually do something or have that conversation about what kind of need you need, the time it takes for that is so poor that the next best thing for you to do is, again, invest in private security if that's a little bit much. And of course, if you can, you even go the extra mile. You make conscious decisions about where to live. You decide to live behind a gated community where there's 3 layers of security to even get onto the premises of a complex. So this is all a reflection of the state's failure. Rinse and repeat again for things like public transport, for example. We sit with an unregulated taxi industry that I think I saw a number earlier this week. They're clocking north of 80 billion rand in revenue per year, untaxed. So you don't have even good options for public transport. And so the industry with taxis, they've kind of privatized it. So that's the situation we sit in. And instead of now addressing their shortcomings at a governmental level, whether they do it inside of the National Assembly or, hopefully, appoint the right people inside of these ministries and, even at a provincial MEC level, instead of addressing these shortcomings, instead, the government is now finding creative laws to say, hang on a minute, why are you exercising a form of liberty that doesn't somehow give money to the government's coffers somehow? It's like really like maybe it's a maturity thing, but I kind of expect someone to, when you're failing, look at your own failings. And, and I've said this before, why doesn't the government just bring in third-party external consultants even? They don't even do that. And in the event that they do that, they pay a hell of a lot of money for expert advice that they don't even make use of. We see this even with auditors. Every year the Auditor General comes out and gives short reports on some of our municipalities and SOEs who pay ridiculous amounts of money to third-party contractors who then give them findings that they don't actually address. So that is the irony of it, but I really find it disgusting because, again, as the citizen, we pay twice for a lot of these things, but as a government, instead of now fixing their problem, and again, we are all pointing to where the problems are. Instead of addressing those problems, instead they say, right, no, we like your solution that you've done for yourself, but there's one problem with it. You need to pay us for it, and that's the disgusting part. So I don't know how we fix this. Perhaps maybe if we had a better caliber of politicians in the National Assembly, they could put government to task over this. Perhaps maybe it's our fault, the voters who actually vote in a government that doesn't actually do better as they promise to do that. Or perhaps it's even lower than that. Maybe it's a societal issue in general. Perhaps we need to, I would say, manage our expectations really of our government, and that we shouldn't even expect them to better any situation. And I don't blame people who, dance around the idea of emigrating to a society where things like police do work, things like healthcare does work, because you pay a lot of money for it, but at least you can kind of see where your money is going. Yeah.
Well, Joe, I was about to say, maybe we'll have a situation now where, when the private security then collapses, as is the possibility here. I mean, if the more law and regulation you pile on that doesn't actually contribute to the efficiency of the service, you risk losing many of these businesses. Maybe they'll then import Cubans, Joe, Cuban security guards to come help us.
Oh yeah, because the Cubans have been so successful, with the medical and fixing the water. They've been just done amazing work, guys. Really feeling the effects there. Yeah, no, seriously, Koketso and I spoke about this last week on my show. We touched on the importance of voting and why people are not, or the elections and why people are not voting. And I spoke to Frans Cornier just this past week as well about the future of South Africa. I think France had a good defense with some of the things that we spoke about, because as we see the decay of this country because of the ANC, make no reservations about that. We're either going to see enclaves slowly building up, and that means communities coming together. They have their own security, they have their own water, they have their own electricity, and they're coming together to get stuff done. And Western Cape could be one of the biggest enclaves, followed by KwaZulu-Natal, because we know there's talks about secession there, and they can do their own thing. And I think that is the future of South Africa within the next 10 years. I think that is exactly what's going to happen as these ridiculous laws that come into play, like, for example, Cele having control. I mean, someone said it earlier, like, I cannot believe this guy still has a job. It's just uncanny. But anyway, as these ridiculous things happen, I think the people of South Africa will come together, like we saw in the KZN riots, and defend their communities by themselves. You try and take away some of these weapons from some of these South Africans. It's not going to go down well. So I think that's where most South Africans, or where South Africa is going to head to. For those who can't leave the country, I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to try and save whatever's left.
Can I just quickly jump in with a small thing about the secession and decentralization, which is just to say, so the idea is that the Western Cape government is pushing for the right to hold referenda, and once they do that, the first thing on the agenda is to say, look, SAPS, you can keep it. We would like to have a Western Cape police force that really has control of that area and is well run. And if that goes through, I think that provides a solution that dodges some of the costs that come with full secession, but it provides a route for inspiring other provinces to see that difference, and for KZN to step up and take that opportunity and then to grow it from there. I do think decentralization, parachuting people, when Cele is the top, imagine who's getting parachuted from the top. It's much better to let people, and the IRR is always championed, let people choose their own sheriffs. Let people vote for their own chief station commander.
Speaking about choosing your own sheriff, thank you for choosing Liberty and Friends. We are heading into that last 30-minute mark of the show. Remember, this is a 90-minute long format show, the only one I have where you, dear viewer, are a part of the show. In conversation with Kanthan Pillay. He's also put his handle there on screen. You'll find him on your social media, Twitter in particular. There he is, Gabriel Crouse from the Institute of Race Relations. Shout out to Gabriel and his podcast, of course, Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree. Nzuzo, Khati, one part of the trio, along with Koketso, Resane from Manpatria podcast. And of course, lastly but not least, Emilio. Welcome to it. We're in that last 30 minutes of the conversation. Fellas, I want to quickly get something out of the way by way of a topic here, because it wasn't that big, but it's big for them, I suppose. Action Essay. And then we'll end our conversation with the conversation around Gareth Cliff and what happened over at the Cliff Central World and the work establishment descending on them like a ton of bricks. But let's begin here, guys. Action Essay, the electoral court comes back and says, actually, no, screw you guys. You don't have to necessarily have your name on the ballot along with the picture of your logo. It's quite okay for things as are. The Action Essay, of course, losing that particular court challenge. But Kanthan, let me begin with you. Someone might be listening to me even say this and say, well, okay, so what? Most people will recognize their logo anyway.
Well, if you consider that a significant chunk of our populace happens to be illiterate, then that's either a plus or a minus, depending on how you look at it. My read of the court judgment, and obviously those among us who are part of the legal fraternity can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but effectively, you see, the first thing to remember is that the limit in terms of the number of letters that you can put in for the party name, Action Essay, comes in within that limit. But my understanding is that they actually forgot to fill in that particular piece of the form where the name actually goes in, because of the fact that that's their party's name. So they didn't fill in a party abbreviation with the expectation that the party name would simply go into that slot. But the IEC is a bureaucracy just like everyone else, and it is not for them to think about the fact that, well, what was actually intended is to put in the name of Action Essay. Now, clearly what the IEC is saying, yes, that there's relief sought, but we can't grant that relief because, ballot paper is already printed and so forth, and therefore we can't go through with it. I think that it's certainly going to be one of those cases where Action Essay is going to say that they were prejudiced in this particular case. And I think that there may be a certain amount of truth there to some extent. But I also think that this is one of those scenarios where, as a direct result of not having done this in the past, that and particularly given the very small time frame that we had right now in the build up to this election, between the time that the voters, the candidate lists were reopened fairly recently and the time of the actual elections, the period of time that we would have had to actually go through this did not actually allow for enough time to print all of those ballot papers. I think that Action SA will do reasonably well, in spite of the fact that that has been left out. But I don't think that their chances are going to be jeopardized too drastically by the absence of their name in that particular slot. It's given them an opportunity to actually put out a campaign saying that they are the only party whose name is not out there and just look out for the logo. On the other hand, their colors are so very similar to a bunch of the other parties that might actually be an impediment. Look, frankly, I think that this is not going to be a problem in future elections. I don't think that the entire democratic process has been undermined as a result. But yes, they have been prejudiced.
But I mean, Kanthan comes to the substantive point I really wanted to bring up for this conversation. And really, I was using the Action SA court thing as a fig leaf for this bit, which is, guys, talk to me. What are the prospects here of a party like Action SA? It seems as though their biggest concern isn't necessarily even the ANC, albeit their rhetoric alludes to that, but actually the DA. They've had quite a few bloody nose scraps with the DA, seemingly more than even with the ANC. The ANC has not really incurred the wrath, so to speak, of a Herman Mashaba quite yet. Again, I'm speaking in very general terms. I'm sure they've criticized the ANC, but it does seem clear, Joe and then Koketso, that the scrap is between the DA and Action SA. Are they fishing in the same pond?
From what I can tell, no. I think that Action SA, and I've said this from the beginning, Action SA is going to be a wild card. It's going to play a wild card in municipality elections and definitely in the national elections. Herman Mashaba has been doing a lot of campaigning and it shows on his social media. He was doing it before a lot of these parties were doing it, going out there, talking to people, doing what politicians are supposed to do. And we've only seen the DA and other parties do it in recent weeks, but Herman Mashaba has been doing it for at least 2-3 months. Is this going to benefit him? I don't know. I do know that, or I've heard that he has a bit of a stronghold in Gauteng. I don't know. I don't think in the Western Cape or any other province. I'm not sure, but I think he's definitely going to play a wild card in Gauteng for sure. And I'm on the fence with them. I think if they stick to their principles, unlike some other parties, they might actually stand a very, very good chance. That's my opinion.
Nzuzo, it does seem as though Herman Mashaba is playing up that persona of his of being a Trumpian-esque type politician. I'll come and fix the problems, he sort of charges head first in. Illegal immigration, for example, and rejuvenating the Joburg inner city. Laudable, by the way, the latter bit. Is this the kind of thing that will play well with the electorate? Is that the issue that should be pushed front and center on a local government election like this one?
Yeah, I think so. It's particularly with reference to what you just said about the Joburg inner city. It used to be vibrant. A lot of people that I know used to love going into the Joburg inner city, and now it's become crime-ridden, crime-infested, as well as it's just not a nice place to go into, during the day or even at night. But I think that he has experience. That's one thing about him, Mashaba, that many other candidates do not have. He was on an interview on Conscious Caracol Show, speaking about how he wants to get rid of the MOEs, the municipal entities in Joburg, which are broke and are eating the fiscus of Joburg. So I think that in that regard, he is experienced as a mayor of Joburg. And I also think that, he's a go-getter. He's someone that, like Joe has said, he's been on the streets, he's been talking to people. And even though he talks about, he talks against foreigners and illegal foreigners, I think that most people in Joburg City in Joburg will actually take favor or actually have favor towards that. They actually like him. They want him to take a stance against foreigners. People still have that thing of foreigners are taking my jobs. On this panel, don't really necessarily look at it as that. But nonetheless, I think that most South Africans or most Joburgers, as well as I know Pretorians as well, they have a thing against foreigners, and that's really gonna help his party a lot in Joburg as well as Pretoria. I think that that's something that we have to look out for. I do think he's gonna make. I think he's gonna make a much more bigger impact than the EFF did at its election in 2014 when he came onto the road, when he came onto the scene. That also another thing is that he's being tactical about it by not going to places like Western Cape as of yet or KZN. Those are big provinces which have their own base, their own people, and he needs to obviously be only after elections will we be able to suss out and see exactly who to speak to, who actually shares his principles, and who to actually and where in which municipalities, which areas of KZN, which areas of Western Cape can he infiltrate. But right now, he's been in Joburg, he's been in Gauteng, he's a man of Gauteng, he was born inside, people love him, people see like he's from the streets, he's from the hood, you know what I mean? That plays a lot as well nowadays, and I think that's going to help him going forward. So I think that we should look out for them. I don't think that it's going to necessarily help. I don't think necessarily it's going to give him seats such as the mayorship of Tshwane or Ekurhuleni, but it's going to give him a good chunk of seats in these councils so that he can actually have. And he's also a tactical man. I mean, he did it with the EFF. As much as we might not like being in partnership with the EFF, you have to do what you have to do. Sometimes you have to make a deal with the devil so you can really make changes. And if the EFF is that type of devil that you're gonna make a deal with, hey man, so be it. I think he's also a astute man, astute businessman, and he understands how much sometimes you have to put things aside and you have to work together with someone that you might not want to work with just for a certain purpose. And then maybe, he might make changes, but we'll have to see.
Well,
I've got to weigh in on this one, Cele.
Go ahead. And then I'll come to Koketso.
Yeah, because Nzuzo, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you've just mentioned there apropos of Mashaba. Now, to put this in perspective, okay, 5 years ago, when Mashaba was running for mayor of Johannesburg under a DA banner, I voted for him. Okay, and I voted for him on the basis that I'd been a supporter of the guy back from the time that he was chairman of the Free Market Foundation. He had had a very good story to tell in terms of obviously his own entrepreneurial background and then being a champion for the free market economy and so forth. And I only wanted Mashaba to do three things in Johannesburg. Okay, I wanted him to fix the traffic lights, fix the potholes, and clean up the rubbish. Just three things. That's all I wanted. I did not want him to be solving the problems of the universe. Just fix those three things, because that's what I want from my municipality. Provide those three things to me consistently. Mashaba was not able to do any of those three things. What he did was consistently bent the knee to the EFF. So the first thing that he did was, you might remember that Parks Tau had initiated a campaign to actually put cycling lanes through most of Johannesburg. And it was an excellent thing to do, because if you look in terms of particularly the greater Sandton area, if you can actually promote a culture of people using cycles to get about in that place and make it readily available, that actually turns us into a first world city. And you had Julius making it a condition of his participation that those cycling lanes had to go. The first thing that Mashaba does is he gets rid of the cycling lanes. Okay, strike one against Mashaba.
Dude, and
strike
just
two,
to say, in Hillbrow and Town, that's like all the dudes I was hanging out with talking about, because that's all you saw from the new DA, was them scratching out the cycling lanes and then fighting with people. It was such a waste. Carry on. Sorry.
Absolutely. So that was the first strike against it. Okay. Second strike against it is that that the biggest obstacle to service delivery in this country is the centralization of power within government structures. Mm-hmm. And so you had Herman Mashaba under him pulling back Joburg Water into the municipality, pulling back Pick It Up, which was a separate entity, into the municipality, pulling back all the security personnel and giving them full-time employment within the city. Whereas what we should have been doing was actually a devolution of power. We should have had a breakup of Pick It Up into small individual black empowerment, by all means, if you want to go down that particular route, companies that are doing cleanups for various sectors of the city, so that you don't have a scenario where you have a single entity like the municipal employees of Johannesburg who are all able to go on strike and shut down the city. If you had Pick It Up split up into all of these individual components, which is the way of the free market, if you have one of those entities going on strike, another one of the entities can then double shift and actually pick up the slack. Okay, so Mashaba just actually went backwards on every single thing. He spent our ratepayers' money on purportedly fixing these buildings in the Johannesburg CBD and turning them into low-cost housing. Ask yourself how many of those projects actually manifested. Those buildings were basically handed out to Mashaba's cronies, and they were paid money to refurbish them. And I'd like to see what happened to that project. And ask yourself how many of those projects the EFF actually had a foothold in. So, Nzuzo, Mashaba's story is a good story, okay? But when it came to execution, he had the opportunity and he failed miserably to take it. And I don't trust him anymore. So I will not be voting Mashaba this time around. Absolutely not.
Can I
I'm
bring
not saying the
balance?
Liberty friends. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm sorry, but like Captain, you went into a very necessary bursting of the bubble around the persona that we've been sold of Uham Mashaba. And again, this isn't a slight against Nzuzo, because Nzuzo is also raising some important bits around who this guy has been presented to us as. But it does feel as though that when people scratch a little bit beyond the surface of the green machine, or green mambas, I think they now call themselves, and there was a comment on screen actually that spoke to this particular point, that there's a big danger around basing your political party around the cult of the individual in this case, because all it takes is someone like Kanthan with a memory that isn't like a goldfish to then remind you of who exactly that particular candidate is and what he does when he's in a position of power, for the whole thing to break apart. Equally, you could have done that same to Rod Kanthan about the EFF, by simply just eviscerating who Julius Malema is, and then the rest of the party looks a bit foolish behind that. Koketso, let me come to you.
Yeah, this is quite a heavy one. So maybe I'll start off by saying that I think every small party does kind of start off as a cult of personality following of some sort. Unfortunately, when you're a relative nobody, I have to like you as the individual before we can actually build something here together. Of course, assuming we build something together, unlike the EFF, which, we still can't picture the EFF without a Julius Malema. But maybe to try bring balance here. So currently, no one stops voting for the DA and then goes and votes for the ANC. Right, it's quite the opposite. DA voters, if they're not happy with the DA, they are likely to go to typically one of the more service delivery focused parties, or alternatively one of the more conservative parties. So, and I think I spoke about this with Joe on his show as well, in that when people no longer vote for the DA, they are now, or let me rather say, Action SA is playing in that pond where they're trying to actually chip away at the DA's voter base more than anyone. And this gives Mashaba, one foot in the door, in that he was a DA guy and he was their mayoral candidate. So again, if you want to vote blue, at some point, blue team trusted Mashaba with effectively the most important metropole in the country. So that gives them a sort of credibility that no one else has. And you could even argue that, right now, even Mashaba seems a little bit more credible than whoever the DA's candidate is right now for C2 of Joburg. Certainly more credible than the ANC guy. We don't even know who the EFF's candidate is for the city of Joburg. Does anyone here know that?
No, that's amazing. I just realized I have no idea.
You see what I mean? So
I know what the DS candidate is, but I'm not giving them free PR if
Oh
you
yeah,
don't know.
I do know that. Yeah, poor
yeah,
Falatse
but
for that one, but I have no idea.
but you see where I'm going now. When you invoke the name Herman Mashaba, you at the very least remember how the DA backed him strongly, and things did seem quite a bit better. Kanthan did mention how Mashaba did fail in a lot of key areas, right down to the nitty gritties, and yeah. Of course, that being true, it does make you think a bit, but he's still a lot more credible than whoever the ANC is putting forward, whoever the DA is probably putting forward right now, in people's minds, of course. Definitely more credible than the unknown at the EFF, of course. So that's going to give him, that is going to get him quite a few votes. But within all of this in context, right, I'm glad that Action SA is actually doing what they're doing, because it's, I don't like shooting, I don't like handicapping people at the starting block here who actually decide to do something about the unhappy situation they find themselves in. We all know it's similar to how it is in business. It's a hell of a lot harder to get started than it is to get going, right? So the fact that they've started something, I'd want to see them, at least get the head out the block, and let's see how far that goes. I'm reminded of the whole COPE scenario with, national government elections as well. I know it's very common to make jokes about COPE, but, I'm glad that they did what they did, because at the very least, principled people, or seemingly principled people, got out of the ANC, right? So yeah, based on that, I think Mashaba is probably going to get some votes, primarily in Johannesburg. It's outside of Johannesburg, and I mean even next door in Ekurhuleni and some other surrounding municipalities around Joburg. I think that's where Action SA will struggle, because in those areas, Herman Mashaba, the man, is not the mayoral candidate or the municipal candidate really. It's sad, but it is the truth. But let's see how far it goes.
Absolutely. And guys, can I just quickly say, just keeping an eye on time, if you guys can indulge me, please, by just another half an hour at max. We'll
Absolutely.
end at 10.
I was so
I
keen
promise.
to say, given you've said what we want to talk about, let's keep going.
Absolutely. This is my only long format show. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. We're talking about Action SA at the moment. It's an option that a lot of you guys are saying in the comment section that you'd be willing to vote for various reasons. We're talking about that party and its leader at the moment. Koketso, I really do take your point around, look, most small parties will begin with some form of, influential figurehead, so to speak, at the front of it. The question is it able to then transcend that? As is, for example, not the case with the EFF, which still has the loudmouth commie at its front and center, a one Julius Malema. The question of whether the party will do well outside of Gauteng is an important one, because it asks the broader question of, are they building something which has the opportunity to eventually unseat a DA, for example, as official opposition? Because let's not fool ourselves, and Koketso, you made the point. Action SA is definitely fishing. I'll answer my own question. It's definitely fishing in the DA's pond. This local government election has very little to do with the ANC, but more with how the DA weathers a battle on many fronts. On the one hand, and I saw the comment in the comment section, a DA that is struggling to maintain its black support base, because Action SA arguably represents a outlet for them. Again, not to say that they vote because they're black for the DA, but I'm just making a broader point here, playing the race game as my opponents do for a second. And arguably, what is the euphemism often used of the base in the DA, i.e. white voters, there's quite a lot of them who are also looking at the Freedom Front Plus, for example, and Action SA as an outlet, and if not even the ACDP as an option. So the DA here is literally, it's that wounded seal in the waters, and the sharks circling. Joe, and then Gabriel, and then Kanthan.
Sorry, I just wanted to unmute myself. Look, I'm going to keep it short for this one. I think, like I said, Koketso and I discussed this at length. At the end of the day, you got to vote for who you feel is close to your principles. And I do think, after hearing everyone now, Action SA is definitely fishing in DA pond, trying to get their voters. I think it's easy for Action SA to, get ANC voters. It's the DA. I think that they just want to, as the DA voters basically jump ship, because I saw the same comment you mentioned, Cele. And honestly, I told Ronaldo House earlier this week that my voter, not that I was going to vote for them, but I was thinking about the DA to vote for them. And my voter confidence has been shook with them because of, they cowardice in a way. One moment they're defending the posters, next moment they take it down. John Steenhuisen's excuse for why they took it down was weak. Gareth Cliff called them out on that. It has shaken my voter confidence with them, and I'm sure it's shaken a lot of voter confidence. And Action SA is going to be looking to take those ones that are like, hey guys, look at us. We'll stick to our principles, unlike that of a DA. And that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. So I think that Herman Mashaba's track record is so interesting. Kanthan described the background very well. The first time I met him was at the Johannesburg Art Gallery, which is the best art institution on the continent. It's got 1 million works. It's got so much amazing South African stuff for the last 100 years. It's got European masters. It's got Picassos and Andy Warhols. That's all, by the way, in other countries right now, because the Johannesburg Art Gallery has flooded repeatedly. This crown jewel can't even hold on to itself. And that started when Herman Mashaba was in charge. Unfortunately, he was there making a speech about Black Like Me and how he cares about aesthetics, and he came off as a worldly chap. And then next I saw him at the Johannesburg Philharmonic Orchestra, I thought he was doing good work there. The contradiction that lay at the center of Herman Mashaba was, I think, on the one hand, like being a business success, but wanting to be like a man of the people guy. And there's a Trumpian thing, The other contradiction is about race. So Mashaba was a frontline critic against treating people on the basis of how they look and promoting them and giving them, he was like, I think, fully aware of the trappings of that way of thinking, especially in terms of how it undermines entrepreneurship. That guy cut his teeth in such a hostile market, and he made it work. It's amazing what he did as a capitalist. And I think that he knew very well that BEE is a policy that incentivizes people to kind of give up and fall into the soft, cushiony cloud of state largesse and self-pity. And when I hear him speak today, I still hear that he understands that, and he is such an important figure in South Africa for talking the talk, having already walked the walk. At that level, great. But he, as a big, heavy, weighty, gravitas kind of dude, came into the same orbit as the EFF. And the question was, at that stage, the question was not, are they going to work together? That question had kind of been resolved. We're gonna try and govern together. That's the only way we can govern, and we're going to show that we can do a good job. The question was, who is going to pull who which way? Is Malema going to pull Mashaba in an EFF direction? Or is Mashaba with his... What was Malema's contribution to the struggle? As a 9-year-old, he was like carrying around messages and playing toy. Mashaba's a real man who's done real things. Was he going to pull Malema in the other direction and be like, dude, you might not like this, but pragmatically, this is what needs to be done in order to really serve the interests of our people? And that's where I think Mashaba just so frustratingly turned out to be a bit of a hollow man. Like, I think that he fell for flattery. There's this YouTube clip that you can see of Julius Malema saying, we weren't in charge, but we really were in charge because Mashaba was insecure. He had made too much money. He didn't know how the people on the ground are feeling. And we educated him about that. And he was a businessman. He didn't have experience in politics. So we educated him in that. And if you look at his comments, if you look at his actions, I think it's demonstrable that that's the case. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, because I think that South Africa needs people who have succeeded demonstrably outside of the BEE world to say, look, it can be done. Look, this is what it takes. Look, this is what gets in the way. It's these guys making these rules that are chasing the money away, that are flipping making us less safe. Let's scrap that. So I think it's a bit of tragedy, and I think the long and short of it is people who I spoke to two people in the last 2 weekends, big bankers, white dudes who were like, yeah, no, I'm going to vote Action SA. And I was like, why? And they were like, because, when the DA took over Joburg, nothing good happened.
And therein lies the contradiction. Guys, look, I just want to say a couple of things out here, because I don't want to make this about Herman Mashaba. Koketso, I want to make the point that I think that having Action SA in the field is a good thing. In as much as you've heard my reservations around Mashaba as in terms of his leadership capacity, I think having Action SA in there is a good thing. I think that right now there's this perception that Action SA is going to take votes away from the DA. I don't believe that that's the case. And let me tell you my reasoning for this. Okay. I think that a lot of people believe that the DA is not going to be taking as many votes as they've done in the past, based on the fact that they don't have a predominant black person as leader of the party. However, if you consider that the number of black people who voted for Helen Zille was larger than the number of black people who voted for Musi Maimane, it immediately kicks out the rug from under that particular theory. That theory makes no sense whatsoever. So here's where I see Action SA playing in this particular election. Remember that there were 11 million people who did not vote in the last election. Okay, and they did not vote in the last election for two reasons. They don't care about the ANC, but they're not prepared to vote for the DA for whatever reasons they might believe that it is the party of apartheid, which it is not. But they might still have that belief based on the ANC's propaganda. So they don't want to vote for the ANC. They don't want to vote for the EFF. But they are looking for an alternative in that middle ground. And I strongly suspect that Herman Mashaba is going to be able, and Action SA in general, is going to be able to tap into that mindset. And I think that that is a good thing for the country as a whole, because if you can get people who are not voting actually into the polls to vote, I think that's a good thing. If I consider, for example, people that I speak to in Durban who are excited about the fact that Makosi Khoza is the Action SA candidate out there, and they point to Makosi Khoza's track record in terms of being purportedly a person of principle in terms of relationship with the ANC, you can actually appreciate why the undecided voter who is not prepared to vote ANC anymore would be drawn to that. Again, I think it's a good thing. So, and please, I don't want to turn this into, how terrible Mashaba was. Okay, I think let's take the view. Okay, I think Mashaba was terrible, but I'm very glad that he's playing in this space. I think it's good for the country. But
Absolutely.
I won't vote for him. Yeah.
Okay, so let me come to you, and then I'll wrap up with Nzuzo. I don't know if you had already chatted on this, because I do want to move us on to the final topic of the evening, which is the woke establishment descending like a ton of bricks on Ugareth Cliff, and really the broader implications of this around who controls the culture in this country, who holds the institutional power that the left often argues that everybody else holds except them. Koketso, your final word?
Yeah, look, my final word on Action SA, I think thanks for that as well, Kanthan. Again, maybe I'm biased in that, consider everything with 2020 and us being locked down and not moving around as much. I don't really have the same kind of sentiment I should have about what the fields are out there for Action SA. But at the same time, I'm now considering, most of my family, which is in the Northwest province. And I kid you not, if I have conversations with them about, who they're potentially voting for in the upcoming elections, I'm almost certain that Action SA is not coming up. For various reasons, one of which is that, again, their strong base is mainly in metropolitan areas and the like. But within the context of, again, in these elections, remember, we vote for our ward councillors and then our municipal mayors, of course, but these are typically the same candidates that your party of choice is going to deploy even in the provincial legislature. So with that in mind, if there is any other reason, if you can't find a reason to vote for Action SA because maybe you don't like Mashaba, but that would be another reason to potentially vote for someone else. Get those numbers in there in that legislature, so that different parties can actually be represented in your municipality at large. So that you can actually get maybe make it a little bit harder for decisions that are made that affect you to just slide through. Have some differing opinions, and also vote for someone else, so that there's additional resistance. Almost what I'm basically advocating for is that let's go out there and actually create an environment where coalitions are absolutely necessary. And I think that will actually force us to be a more mature electorate, because we'd be actually willing to listen to the messages of some of these parties, instead of outright voting for a party because you support the party regardless of what they do, where they mess up, and where they actually fail to deliver on their promises.
Nzuzo, final word on this Action SA thing. Your thoughts again, and maybe let me give us a targeted question. What do you think their prospects actually are in this election? Very briefly, please.
Yeah, I think Joburg, I think not only they'll be able to take Joburg, I think they'll be able to get a large chunk of votes, but not take Joburg. Accordingly, they might get a couple of votes, as well as Pretoria. I don't know the other metropolitan areas which they are in, but I think that those three, they'll be able to make good ground in this, particularly Joburg. Yeah, man, thank you for those those points made by Kanthan as well as Koketso and everyone in the panel. Yeah, I mean, I think I chose, like Kanthan said, they actually say is a good alternative for people who are on the middle ground. I didn't like DA. I've never voted DA in metropolitan areas. It's just not my flavor. I just don't. It's just, for me, it's not a good choice for me. I actually wanted the IFP to actually make headway, but then after having come into partnership with the ANC in the last in that last whole debacle, where the DAs, where Herman Mashaba left, and then after the ANC government came into power with the coalition of IFP, Joburg still has not done has not made any headway with these candidates in the IFP. The departments that they're in charge of, they've actually deteriorated. So I guess they're also going through the same mistakes that Herman Mashaba did in 2016. You say that you're gonna change the face of you're gonna change the trajectory of the council, but then after when you come into it, you do something very different. So for me, that's why I feel like Herman Mashaba, Action SA rather. You see what I mean? I'm already like cult leader. Oh my gosh, this is the only guy I can think of. But nonetheless, I hope that Action SA, they look like a party that's willing to hit the middle ground and actually bring South Africans together, particularly those in Joburg. Nonetheless, and also I think that I've also spoken to people in Durban, and they're also excited about Makosi Khoza becoming a possible mayor. I don't think it's going to happen, but nonetheless, she's making a good headway that side. So that's for me. I think actually SA could make do some damage. But also going into the next topic, I just want just a question
just hang on. I must put a bookmark there, just to remind the viewers who might be wondering why the show is running overtime. Welcome to it. We are adding another 30 minutes to the conversation, and we're heading into that topic that I know a lot of you are waiting to hear from. Did Gareth Cliff say something wrong? Is Gareth Cliff the racist that we've been told by the political elite and, of course, the mainstream media establishment that he is? Is the final question a Mudzuli Rakivane, the 1SA movement participant who was on his show, the black victim that she is said to have been at the hands of a one John Steenhuisen and Gareth Cliff, and maybe opening up that account for us should be Nzuzo Khati. Khati, what's going on here, dude? Is there's two evil white men destroy that poor black sister? You know, they were just totally. You could see the white supremacy in that interview, couldn't you?
Yeah, man, it was a sore time, I really saw it, coming with claws on both sides, I really saw it actually attacking that the young lady. Just also a question, I just want to know, Kanthan, you've been a victim of this outrage mob. What happens? Like, does it just die down and life carries on? Because ultimately, that's all what happens. That's what really pisses me off. It's just you have couple of days, maybe a week or so. Then after that, next issue, next story to talk about. But then after that, there's no action, there's no research, there's no reports. It's just blah 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 blah, and then we move on to the next one. So rather than actually speaking or commenting right now, I just want Kanthan to start so that he can just tell us where does this go, so that if we are the victims of it, what do we expect?
There you go, Kanthan.
Look, guys, so one of the things that I want to say out here is that Gareth and I are in similar situations because there was a Twitter storm of note based on particular actions that we had conducted. But the fact of the matter is, I'm standing here talking to you. Gareth is going to be on air tomorrow morning. And no matter what the mob says, their ability to actually shut us down is non-existent. What the mob has the ability to do is to put pressure, particularly on the corporates who end up providing the lifeblood of media organizations, because media is an expensive thing to run if you want to do it properly. Now, it's a very different scenario for people who are doing occasional or even daily podcasts for a brief stretch of time. But Gareth is actually the grandfather of podcasting in this country. In fact, he's been called the podfather on occasion. He's the person who first said this can be turned into a significant outlet for voices in the South African media landscape. And I have to say that Nandos stuck to their guns for a number of years in terms of ensuring that the money supply flowed in the direction of Gareth. I know a lot of people are now climbing in and saying, let's actually start boycotting Nandos and all of that kind of thing. Look, guys, ultimately what happens is they end up making a business decision, and that business decision gets made based on exactly how much appetite they have to take flack from a particular audience. And I think that in this particular case, they sat down and they said, we're taking a view in this particular case that this is this is a hill that we're not prepared to die on. In the case, in my case, in terms of my departure from ENCA, I made it very clear at the time that the chief executive of the company and I had a discussion, and he is the chief executive of the company. And I told him, if you think that it's in the best interests of ENCA that I am out of the picture, then let's shake hands on that. Because the last thing that I want to be doing is to be getting in the way of the agenda that you have for ensuring that this organization actually survives. So we need to separate the stuff that's going on now from the Twitter outrage, independence of media, the critical need for us to be funding independent media. But crucially, I think the question that we need to be focusing on is how do we get to a stage where we are avoiding people who might be inclined to put money behind independent media. And Nandos, clearly said that their commitment to free speech is untrammeled. But when you have a scenario where a Twitter mob is able to put so much pressure on them that it actually starts undermining the integrity of their business and then pulls it down, how do you actually fight against that? And what I would really like us to do is to apply our minds to that very real problem. Because unless we can find a way to be funding independent voices, and the fact is, if I'm looking at all of you on screen right now, I'm the only person here who is not actually running his own show. Okay, and I think it's very important that each and every one of you is actually having that platform where you're able to put divergent voices. Because, I mean, look, Koketso and Nzuzo, Joe, Gabriel, we've all of you guys have disagreed with my viewpoints on the show for this entire couple of hours that we've been here. And that's good, because that's how we actually end up growing as a nation. But you shut down all of your voices, and we actually only have what the Twitter mob says is going to be acceptable. That becomes the problem. That's when we fall as a nation. So I don't think it's about Gareth, and I don't think it's about Nandos. I think it's about how we actually solve that problem.
And let me...
Yeah.
No, but actually you're spot on, Kanthan, because I do think that is the conversation here to a large extent. And Gareth is just the hook, to be brutally honest. And why do I say this? Gabriel, I'm going to come to you, and then Joe, and then Koketso. And I began this by saying that there's a conversation to be had here around who actually holds the quote-unquote power, that often, those who claim they don't hold it, usually the woke mob, the sort of broadly speaking trendy lefty mainstream voices in this country, they'll be some of the first people to say, oh, no, hang on, we don't have institutional power. Institutional power is in the hands of those we agree with. Checks notes, white males, checks notes, whatever spectrum they want to argue of people who hold that power, and that they are the victims of it because it is used, that power, to oppress them. It was those individuals now who actually rallied and singled out Gareth Cliff, singled out Nandos, and basically using this weapon that they wield, weaponizing race, effectively, initiated a cancel culture of sorts against Gareth Cliff. Gabriel, I must come to you then. That's the irony for me in this entire thing, is that the voices we hear from the most in our society demanded that we hear least of those that are already heard of the least, i.e. those who are in the alternative media space, podcasting and the like. Is that not just the delicious irony of this whole situation?
Dude, let's make it more delicious. Gareth was quoting IRR polling.
Yeah,
that IRR polling comes from ordinary South Africans, people who don't have their own show, people who make their bread and butter, meet together, buy all kinds of things, okay, that the spotlight doesn't shine on. That's who we spoke to. And it cost a lot of money to get a random survey going. And we've done it again and again. Gareth cites those figures. He doesn't cite the figures. He just refers to it. He says, IRL polling has shown consistently that racism is the bottom of most South Africans' priorities. I can give a number to. He said nobody. Okay, that's not technically right. It's actually 3%. I think that under the convention of conversational English, if you say nobody believes the moon is made of cheese, and then someone else goes and finds a tiny minority who think it's really made of cheese, it's okay. Nobody doesn't literally mean nobody. It's not technically correct, though. But it's a tiny minority. And against that, you have one person saying, my lived experience is I suffer racism every day. And what wins out? It's not the ordinary voices of thousands of people that we've polled again and again through the years. It's someone whose job it is to stand in the spotlight. And I think that asymmetry is dire. I think that as head of campaigns for the IRR, we haven't made up our minds, but my immediate impulse was like, you know what? If you guys want to take away your money from Gareth Cliff for citing ordinary South Africans whose voices have only been heard through this very expensive mechanism of a statistically representative poll, and instead you want to stand with a person who says, everyone who looks the same thinks the same. So I think I'm suffering racism every day. Therefore, everyone who looks the same as me must think the same thing. If you want to choose that kind of Volksgeist ideology that's been going since Berlin in the 1880s over good humans or individuals, let's try and get statistical polls, then I can't do business with you. But if your issue is Gareth's style, I like his style, whatever, you can disagree. If you stand for the science and you stand for getting ordinary South Africans' voices heard, I call on Nandos to sponsor the next IRR survey, and we'll ask the same questions. We'll use the same methodology. Give us your bucks. If you're not too chicken, put your money where your mouth is and let's uplift freedom of speech. Let's hear, what do people want to say? What is their lived experience? And let's not let someone with a microphone and a job that most of people my age and younger don't have. Let's listen to the people. Nandos, you've got money. You like to sponsor things. Why don't you sponsor a survey about race relations through the IRR? And then after that, you can even sponsor publishing the results. And I think that would be a terrible outcome for Gareth in the sense he quotes the IRR. He loses the money. We get it. But on the other hand, I think that guy's such a mensch and has such a commitment to free speech and this country and living intelligently that he wouldn't be bitter about it.
Absolutely.
That's my initial pushback. Let's really add to free speech. Let's hear what ordinary people have to say.
And please know I will clip this and we'll CC Nandos. Nandos, that is a challenge to you. Are you willing to hear the voices of those ordinary South Africans in this particular instance? Joe, let me come to you because, again, I want to rephrase this because I do think it's the issue at play here. It's the notion of who holds that institutional power. But actually, let me be specific. We talk a lot about the culture. Dear folks who are on the liberty side of the argument, who are maybe right of center or conservative, the one thing those folks have not realized, that if you do not have control or rather a major say in the culture in that society, you will be railroaded by people who have made a massive investment in that particular side of things, whether that investment is in line with, for example, what we watch in the mainstream media, what's on your SABC channels, whatever the case may be. He who controls the culture easily controls the narrative. And we saw that over this weekend in the space of a few hours on a Friday before I went out offline for Shabbos. A few individuals online rallying in order to develop the narrative, a narrative which they knew would carry into Sunday when the Sunday papers then amplify their messaging right through Saturday and, of course, into Sunday. A recognition by that same woke establishment that they run the culture, their narrative rules.
Yeah, it's very true, Cele. Unfortunately, wokeism is very strong and has a stronghold on mainstream media, has a stronghold even on YouTube. There's certain things we can't say or talk about on YouTube, otherwise we'll get banned or shadow banned. It exists on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, nearly every single social media platform. And those that have leniency to these rules, like Gab or Gitter or all these other platforms that are emerging that are considered right-wing or conservative, are immediately shut down, and they say, oh, there's conspiracy theories on those platforms, they're evil, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, a lot of people fall for this. I mean, we saw this again, like you just said. First of all, I want to say, what's her name? Muzuli. Yeah, Muzuli. She knew exactly what she was doing when she clipped that specific part of the conversation. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the outrage was going to be strong on social media. She omitted a lot of the conversation that was being had, which was about the DA posters. Furthermore, it was a debate between 1SA and DA. The majority of the interview, they were laughing, they were joking, they were talking, there were a few jabs here and there, but there was not a lot of, as some people are saying, oh, Gareth Cliff talks over. She talked over them as well, many times. It was a debate. It happens, okay? But no, white man told a black woman in South Africa that your lived experience doesn't matter. And everybody jumped on that bandwagon. Even those that hate Gareth Cliff and didn't even watch the episode, those that didn't watch the episode and just hate Gareth Cliff, those that just saw the clip and went absolutely insane, jumped on that bandwagon. And not even 12 hours later, mainstream media reporting on it like crazy. And like you said, Cele, this huge machine coming to cancel this white man because of what he said. I would like to know what would have happened if it was a black man who said it. I would like to know what would have happened if I said it. I've experienced racism. It's definitely not a major problem in South Africa. That's the main point Gareth Cliff was trying to say. It is not the main problem in South Africa. Or this black woman trying to say that my lived experience represents the entire black population is not true. Sorry, it's not. I actually saw someone in the comments say that, and I agree with it 100%. I experienced racism in South Africa, but I can probably count on my one hand the amount of times I've experienced it in the 14 years that I've lived here. Racism is not the biggest problem in South Africa, but the problem is that these wokies and the lefties that want to hold on to this grift, because it's exactly what it is, if they accept that racism is not the major problem in South Africa, they will lose a ton of money. These mainstream media organizations, the elites, the ANC, the EFF, they make money off of this. They thrive on it and they divide the nation, and that is the biggest problem. They are dividing us time and time again. Every time color or your skin color comes into the equation, and South Africans need to stand up against this ridiculousness. We are a rainbow nation, whether you want to believe it or not, or you want to believe into that analogy or not, because when I go out in my area, no one's being racist towards each other. We're all getting along. No one's like, telling someone to piss off or whatever. Yeah, you hear a story once in a while, every now and again, maybe, but for the most part, you know what people are really worried about? You know what the biggest issue is? ANC and everything that falls under that, load shedding, all the other stuff, the service delivery, all that stuff, EFF, mainstream media, and woke politicians. Those are the biggest problems in South Africa. People know that, and unemployment, forgot to mention that's a big one. Those are the biggest problems in South Africa. That is what the IR has recently polled on as early as 2020, by the way. And I saw some wokey try and tweet some stats from 2018, so that was a bit outdated, buddy. But yes. Furthermore, lastly, on this topic, nobody must fall for the race grift that these politicians and mainstream media are trying to do. Like you always say, Cele, never trust a commie, and hashtag politicians are trash. That woman knew exactly what she was trying to do. And like Kanthan Pillay said, the wokes didn't win. This is the last what I'm going to say. The wokes didn't win. Tomorrow, Gareth Cliff's going to turn on that mic. Thursday, he's going to have the burning platform. There will be another sponsor. He will continue. The wokes did not win. And that's the best way that we can fight this, is talk about this. These companies should be, I wouldn't say boycott Nandos. Nandos is a huge establishment. It's like trying to boycott Coke. It's not going to happen. But, maybe just support someone else or have your opinion said or whatever. But at the end of the day, when a new sponsor comes and goes onto the burning platform, support them. Support the hell out of them. All right? But honestly, lastly, Gareth Cliff, if you watch this, I would say go independent, buddy. Just get support from your members or whatever have you. You can do membership on YouTube or I don't know, Bitcoin, whatever you want, and make yourself bulletproof and independent, and you'll never have to worry about this ever again. Anyway, they'll never take you down, buddy. You are a like they said, the pod father. There you go.
Okay, so Ucho raises some important points here. But here's how I want to frame it with you, because I think it's necessary that we still need that drop mic moment. And Nzuzo, brace yourself. I'll come to you after this. There is something to be said, and Joe said it now. Let me find this girl's name. Umudzuli knew exactly what she was doing by clipping that particular section. She knew exactly what she was doing. Never underestimate the predictability of the black victimhood narrative in this country. Never underestimate the predictability of someone who plays up the notion that because and you heard how she phrased it, you heard how she primed it. My experiences as a black woman in this country. And Gareth rightly, by the way, said, actually, no, that has nothing to do with the topic here. Please respect, effectively what Gareth was saying is please respect the platform insofar as what we're chatting about. But that reality then got twisted because black victimhood is a very powerful both resource financially in this country. It's the race grift, as I like to describe it on social media. And of course, insofar as giving you monetary power, so to speak, it also gives you political power. It is used by politicians as a grift. The race grift and black victimhood, Koketso, it's really the industry of our day.
Yeah. Permission to unload, since I'm a guest here.
Go ahead, dog.
Okay, let me set up for this even. Look, so I think, yeah, what you call the race grift, Sowell calls, I think, the race industry.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually gone beyond race. It's now well into the realm of even, the gender identity politics. So, I mean, firstly, people have been, you've got people, you've got all the wokers, all the people on the left, etc., looking forward to the grand cancellation of Gareth Cliff. It's like they're waiting for it and they smell blood, and it's not going to happen because people have been trying to cancel Gareth Cliff since before I had a beard. I've had a beard for a long time, by the way. So it's not going to work. Firstly, Gareth has actually withstood quite a bit of this in his career, even in the media. It just won't work, and this is probably part of the reason why he created, his platform to begin with. So that he can actually not be accountable to someone who is willing to pander to whatever popular ideology is of the day. So it won't work. To maybe even contextualize this even further, who remembers, just over a year ago when McGee, who I believe has the biggest podcast in the country right now, the Rainbow community tried to cancel McGee and his guests. They had Old Mutual as a sponsor. Old Mutual immediately, pulled their sponsorship of the show. And I believe they were sitting maybe at about 100,000 YouTube subscribers at the time. They're on 500,000 right now. So again, it's not going to work. And the wokeists who are smelling blood here, sorry to disappoint you, but all of this might have actually, gone into exponentially increasing Gareth Cliff's following online at the very least. And then on top of this, right, I've seen comments from people, saying they try to really belittle not just Gareth Cliff, but they do this with me, they do this with other people, where they go ahead and say things like, what does a DJ know about the lived experience, or what does a DJ know about racism, or on the ground issues, etc., etc. Well, and I said this yesterday, that since they value degrees and all of that so much, we've seen this by how they really sucking up to Dr. Sizwe Mpofu Walsh, of course, since they value education so much in certain aspects, in certain fields. Do they know that Gareth Cliff actually has a degree in politics? I don't believe they know that. So again, that actually qualifies him to speak more on politics, probably philosophy and other things that a lot of these people on the left do. So, but again, you won't find Gareth coming out and saying that according to my learned opinion, etc. Because he's a principled person, of course. But maybe this is again maybe further evidence that the left doesn't have a lot of party tricks. They always bring up racism at every opportunity. My favorite morons, Eusebius McKaiser and Dr. Ibrahim Kendi, are quite good at this, actually.
We're naming them today.
I know, I'll name them. Hey, and I'll say to their face, even, they're my favorite morons. They have no party tricks. At every opportunity, they have to bring it up. They have to write a book about this. And then, of course, those on the opposite side of the spectrum, they then wait for them to write nonsense or speak on nonsense before they come out with their own books and actually profit off the left's idiocy, of course. But they don't have any party tricks. They bring nothing to the table. They don't bring anything substantial to argue. And we had Germinal G. Van on Manpatria the one time, who was basically saying that, it's funny how you don't even find these people in something like a STEM field where no one cares about your political ideology. You're in an industry where people are trying to invent something, and it's a lot harder to invent something tangible than coming out and capitalizing or profiteering off your perceived oppression or invented atrocities, of course. Now, on Muzuli's lived experience comment, so I'm a middle child. I've got two sisters. Obviously, since I'm a middle child, I've got an older sister, I've got a younger sister, and me and my sisters, we're pretty close, right? And I'm pretty sure if I go and ask them right now if they have a lived experience of racism every day, these aren't people who are stuck behind the wall somewhere. If I go and ask them about their lived experience of racism, I'm pretty sure they're probably going to cite little to none, if there's any. So again, to build a narrative that as a Black woman, the moment you leave your front door, you're confronted with patriarchy and racism and all of this, is actually not true. And it's quite belittling to Black women out there who are actually doing a lot, not just for their communities, but also for themselves in the career field, etc., etc. I don't like reducing Black women to, oh no, you're just a Black woman. That's really not the way you approach anyone when you meet them. And certainly, even if you want to make a friend, I don't look at Joe and say, oh, okay, cool, Joe, I like your skin tone, let's actually have a conversation and be friends here. That's not how people treat each other, and it's not how they've treated each other since the time when race was actually used as a qualifier to determine things like genetic superiority under the banner of eugenics and Hitler's philosophies as well. So there's also that. I don't like that term of my lived experience as a Black woman. It's very belittling to the other Black women and makes an assumption into other people's lives who you've never met. And then on top of this, right, the whole racism thing as well. I think it's also kind of put offside because, and it's funny that, when you read books, particularly those written in the 80s and onwards, if racism is so bad in South Africa and is really at the top of the list of people's problems, why is it that we have a border issue where we've got an influx of illegal immigrants coming into the country who are predominantly Black, or predominantly of Asian descent? Why, if racism is so bad here, why would people risk it all to actually come to this country? If it's so bad, I mean, let's be honest here. They come here because they're typically enterprising and want to make or eke out a better life for themselves and potentially increase their standard of living, of course. But if racism is so bad, why would they do this? They do this because racism is not as bad as people on the left make it out to be. And the people who do make racism such a key issue are typically people who live a life of comfort. In their comfort, sitting, comfortably at home with a job, with a stable income, with a plan B if Eskom's load shedding goes out, with Wi-Fi, fiber, uncapped internet, those who can afford a Netflix subscription, a DSTV subscription. Only those people actually come out and then decide that, oh no, we need to, we need to build a movement around combating racism and the like. They don't represent the poor like they say, like they think they represent them. They really don't represent the victims like they say they represent them either, because they live, they almost have delusions of grandeur where they want to decide for other people what their biggest issues are, which I find that quite arrogant, and yeah, it's textbook bigotry as well. But on top of this, maybe to wrap it up, Muzulu had an excellent opportunity to actually come out and educate people like me about One SA. And I've said this before, that I like what they're doing. I like the idea of saying, look, let's have some independent candidates, but let's maybe put them under one umbrella so that it's easier to actually spread our message, not just, in a local context, but even nationally. I like the idea. And I really was looking forward to hearing more about One SA and what they plan to achieve specifically even beyond the local government election. I didn't get a lot of that, or definitely most people didn't, because all of this is now overshadowed by deciding to be woke instead of now focusing on the idea at hand, which was supposed to be a discussion about the local government election and potentially even introducing us to One SA. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people hadn't heard about One SA. Suddenly this clip comes out, this very curated segment of this clip comes out, and all of a sudden, instead of now focusing on One SA, we are now focusing on, identity politics. So it's a lost opportunity for One SA. I was really expecting better. I really thought that One SA at the very least would have people of higher caliber who are actually able to, separate their own lived experience, if I can put it like that, and actually address issues directly, but that didn't happen in largesse on the burning platform. It's sad to see. It's a wasted opportunity, but yeah, I really do expect more, and let's see where this actually takes us. Potentially, I might have even voted for them, or whoever the candidate is where I live. That's no longer happening anymore because, I haven't heard the messaging I might resonate with. Instead, I was served a plate of identity politics, and I'm sending this order back. I don't even want my money back. Keep the change.
Yeah. Keep the change. Nzuzo, I'm sorry. I must come to you after that, man. Good luck.
No, that was a mic drop moment there from Koketso. Come on, guys.
Yeah, man. Let's just close the show right now.
I did ask.
But I must say this. I mean, Nzuzo put it, pardon me, Koketso put it perfectly. And I'll add to this. Here's a woman who has an opportunity to tell the viewers what her organization stands for, didn't care, because she literally in that moment spotted the race grift. Nzuzo, she spotted the race grift, and the idea that she will have a throng of people online who then play into this. And she even gave up telling us about her own party in order to be seen as so many blabbity blacks, because that's what I call them. I call these I call these ultra woke lefty individuals who trade on their skin color as black people, blavity blacks, and those who are white and trade on their skin color, often telling us how, because they're whites, they are they're descendants of oppressors and blah, 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 and they must self-flagellate forever. these social justice warrior whites, as I like to put them. But it's that coalition of blavity blacks and social justice warrior whites who are absolutely toxic to the narrative, or rather to progress in this country. Because whenever we then talk about the real substantive issues, as Gareth was trying to do, we'll always be taken back to the race grift. How they, as a black person or as a white person, blah, 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 insert victimhood. It's a massive problem.
Yeah, man, it's a massive problem, and just going back on many of the things that the panelist says, people on the ground are just too poor, they're just too hungry, and they're just too broke to be thinking about their lived experience as a black person or as a colored person. Dog, I'm hungry. I need a job. I need to put my money. I need to put food on the table. I'll go to anywhere. I go to the most racist guy in the country and I'll ask him for a job because that's how desperate I am. When you talk about just the race script, the books that are coming out. We have obviously the Sizwe Mpofu Poch, whatever his name is. Sorry if I messed it up. We have Eusebius. We have this other lady called Hella, something Hella. I don't know what her name is, but she was actually like making a proposal to Gareth to talk about the black lived experience as a white person. It's got to that.
Helen Keller.
Like, wow.
Helen Keller.
Yes. She's saying, I want to tell you as a lived experience of a black person, but I'm a white person. I was just like, hey dog, you taking this hustling to another stage, teach me the game. Teach me the levels. I want to know.
It's the race script, man. It's the race script.
Yeah.
That's like Willy Wonka telling you about salads.
Dude, the snake oil that they selling is just out of this world, man. And it's always what they always relegate themselves to. They just cannot bring anything, and that's the problem. Like, dude, you could have easily just told us what I want to essay is about, and you took it left. You took it totally left. You tried to manipulate and guilt trip Gareth and John into now making themselves feel like they said something bad. When really, dog, you haven't contributed anything to the discussion about what the hell is one essay saying. You know what I mean? Like, dude, just tell us that. Don't tell us about your experience as a black. No, you're representing a constituency. Tell us what they're feeling and what they feel like you want. What they want in the changes that they want in their municipality. Tell us that. Don't tell me about what you go through. And plus, I definitely think that you're not going through anything, because I could hear that accent in your voice. I could hear that money that took you to those universities. I could hear that you actually have been to places that many black people in this country have not been. So please, dog, take that thing and shut it up. Shut up. Sorry, actually. No, I'm not gonna say it, but nonetheless, it's pitiful, man. You just living in that self-pity, that self-depression, and it's just like, dog, get out of the water, get out of the pool. You wet because you're in the pool. Get out of the pool and focus. And another thing is that I think that Ramaphosa is salivating at this thing, because these are the kids that ANC have created. These are the kids that the ANC has. You know what they say, that psychology 101. When you keep on pushing the agenda of someone else, the person has already done 50% of the work. He's done. Now he just needs to obviously try and convince it and try and manipulate the rest who have not even believed in it to say that stuff. That's exactly what it is. And like I said in the comments, for Wood, Henry Wood will be proud of these people. You'll be like, yes, these are my kids. These are my kids. This is what I produced. And that's the problem. It's like, bruh. And that's why I asked Kanthan, like, you have these outrage mob for 2-3 days, maybe 5 days. They go at it. They tell Nandos, we're gonna boycott your chicken. I'm boycotting Nandos because you can't be selling chicken for $200, dog. Nah, nigga, I can get a full chicken for $50. No, nigga. But anyway, you can't like they're gonna boycott Nandos. They're gonna boycott Nandos for purposes of supporting Gareth. And then after that, they don't even provide no substantive policies or anything of that matter to the discussion. Do you tell me about you? I just like I was saying yesterday on our podcast, I just watched a video of the Center of Risk Analysis saying that people in different parts of South Africa cannot even feed themselves no more because it's just that
Yeah.
expensive. It's just that expensive. And they're not even talking about that. They're not even talking about that. Like people cannot even feed themselves, for Christ's sake, man. And I'm just like, it's just like, dude, you guys are annoying. You guys just shut up. Just shut up. And it's the same people who are gonna vote for the ANC. I can bet you. I can. Let's bet money now. Everyone in the comments, let's bet $100. It's the same people that are gonna vote for the ANC, and they're gonna say that ANC just because they represent LGBTQ alphabet community. Now we must support. It was like, dude, these people are the same people that shut down 34 miners. These are the same people that still 500 billion. These are the same people that took away millions of jobs during COVID. The same people that stole money for the purposes of vaccines. Like, these are the same people. Do you guys have? I don't know. Like, feed you Gabriel? Do they go to Imhlaba and just eat that medicine? You know, when they just forget and they're on the Men on Black. I just don't understand what is all these people, dog. It's just crazy.
You know what, guys? I'll give everybody a chance. Don't get me wrong. I won't close the conversation quite yet. Let's go until 1:30, guys. Then we must wrap it up. You know, as I wanted to come to Kanthan, and then Gabriel, fellas, there's something Nzuzo actually said which is important here, and I want to premise it first by saying this: we need to burst this myth in this country that somehow all Black people are the same, that somehow there is no intellectual diversity amongst us, and that if I see one. What's this girl's name? Muzuli Rakivane. If I see a Muzuli Rakivane on my screen and she complains about her Black victimhood and how she experiences racism on a day-to-day basis, that somehow that translates to an experience that all Black South Africans endure. And that on that basis, as my battery runs low here, on that basis, that's why she must be defended at all costs by the likes of your Lindiwe Mazibugo, who came out talking crap about how the diminishing of the Black experience and blah, blah, blah. And Musi Maimani, another race grifter, who came out also talking crap in support of her own. Now, it's interesting that those two in particular came out wanting to be seen as some of the loudest voices in support of the Black girl on there, because there's almost an unspoken need by them to absolve themselves of the so-called, especially because it's been a criticism leveled at them for years, being at the black face of white parties, for example. I've always found it very interesting that they now sort of latch onto these sort of woke, blabbity black type issues for whatever their particular reasons are, but I'm not lost, what's not lost on me is their need to be absolved of, for example, having been at the helm of, quote, the white party, close quote, in this country. It's laughable because they then play into that very notion that somehow Blacks are homogenous. There's no diversity amongst us. There's no class differences. So that a Black individual who goes to Oxford and comes back with a PhD, back to their family where their parents have always been millionaires, somehow represents the experience of all Black South Africans in this country. Kanthan, it's a laughable notion, and really it's a soft bigotry, really, of low expectations.
Yes, and it's fundamentally patronizing on the part of particularly the white race baiters who end up doing this type of thing, because it insists that in order for you to get into that scenario, you have to have an extremely patronizing view of the intellectual capability of the Black population, which fundamentally makes them the racists in the game. And, you know, I hate to say this, but it looks like Cele's battery has just died. So are we going to be able to continue running this show on our own?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio Show. Continue.
No, guys. No, go on. I'm still here. I'm just plugging in my PC, but go on.
You're being hijacked here, dude. DDL is being taken over.
From Kanthan to Gabriel, please.
Yeah, but look, guys, but you know, just to finish this this particular train of thought, I think that really what we need to do is to draw up a list that we publicize and we actually circulate in terms of these people who, to my mind, are actually the core racists in our society, because they are the ones who refuse to accept the fact that Black people are anything other than victims. And I think we need to draw up this list. We need to circulate this list among us. And we don't have to call them racist. We just need to point out every occasion where they are patronizing in terms of assuming on their behalf that they speak on behalf of Black people And more importantly, that they speak on behalf of a homogenous black population who are not able to make up their own minds on anything. And I'm going to start off by calling out the people at 702 who's saying that Gareth Cliff has lost sponsorship over a racist incident. And no one has called him a racist. Nandos has not called him a racist. But 702, by sneaking that into the headline, they're calling it a racist incident. And they are pushing this divisive agenda throughout the country right now. And they need to be smacked down. And the way in which we smack them down is we don't listen to them.
Yeah.
And every
Even the
time this happens,
SAHRC hasn't called him a racist, surprisingly.
yes. So, starting point. But by the way, I also wanted to say something, Nzuzo, in terms of your excellent rant earlier, that, at the end of the day, it doesn't work. Because, I'm still, and let me show you guys this, I'm still using Resane for normal hair. I'm using Resane for normal hair. And I insist that it's normal hair because, guys, my tribe invented shampoo. Okay? So by definition, this is normal hair. The rest of you guys can make up your own thing, call it whatever you want. Shampoo was invented by Indians. The word itself comes from India. Okay, this is normal hair, Resane.
Is
right?
mine normal? Is mine normal?
Hey man, the EFF are losing their minds right now, even as you say that. But Gabriel, I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and really this will be final comments, I suppose, from everybody on this issue before we close the show. It really, I'm sorry, Gabriel, there's something actually really serious about this, because Kanthan is right. It must be challenged. It must be challenged. There are many headlines that were asserting this notion. Again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier on, that he who controls the culture controls the narrative. 702 knew what they were doing by slyly putting in that little comment, X reason was because Gareth was racist. Because they know the vast majority of people trust them as an institution because they hold institutional power on disseminating information and wouldn't really look beyond that headline as to whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I think 702 is, let's just remember, that's where Gareth got his first big national platform. It was an exciting station, and it's really gone by the wayside, and it's been a long time coming. And I think, here's my point on boycotting. Don't punish the chef for what the owner does, because then ultimately you're punishing your own belly. Okay? If there's a really good product, enjoy the product and pressure the owner. If there's a crap product, just leave the product. So to me, every time I listen to 702, like, I do that to get my heart rate up and feel depressed about the country. I hear, last time I was on there, it was a nightmare. I stopped listening to them after I couldn't count anymore how many times I'd heard a black caller call in about a race-based issue. There's like some idiot ne'er-do-well says some terribly racist thing, and then suddenly that's the whole country, and people are calling in. Then some guy calls in, it's Sipo from Soweto, and he's saying, that thing over there was terrible, but actually I've got bigger problems, and politicians are just using this to distract from their issues, which, by the way, we find 60% of South Africans agree to the statement, politicians talk up race and colonialism to distract from their own issues. So, and then that guy gets grief from the host. And we're all experienced doing this thing, public speaking. We're chatting with each other, but there's an audience. Most people aren't. They're kind of freaking out when they're dialing into the radio, and they're taking a chance here. And then some very comfortable host is like, yeah, you're undermining my lived experience and this and that. And if you don't agree with me, then you are captured by a white mentality. And then you discourage people from phoning in. I don't like that product. I don't listen to 702 because I don't like the product. Okay. If you like the product, let me tell you from our experience of like campaigning against prescribed assets, where the government's idea through Ibrahim Patel, amongst others, was to like take your pension and use it to pay for SAA and whatever else is a brilliant idea. The thing ultimately is to withdraw your funds from that one bank and put it into another bank. But that is going to come at a cost. Okay. And the same for not eating this chicken and going for that chicken if it's the closest chicken. It's going to hurt your belly. Rather use your voice. You have a voice. Reach out to those guys and say, I'm pissed off with this decision. This irritates me. You're using a fake excuse. He interrupted her. She interrupted him. He interrupted John's DNAs, and he ended the show by saying, I want you back on the show. 10 minutes before the end of the show, he said, you've spoken very eruditely. And I don't mean to dismiss all your experience. Anecdotes matter. Your personal experience matters. I like looking at things beyond that. But you've comported yourself in an exemplary fashion, and I want you back. This guy spoke in a civil manner. He was speaking to data science over this. I think you guys have made a rubbish call. By the way, you sponsored a speech by Julius Malema. We didn't withdraw anything on the basis of that. You've made a mistake here. Fix your mistake. You have that pressure as a customer. You don't just have to withdraw. You can pick up a phone and or send a letter. And on the seat of my pants, my first impulse is tell Nandos to take their money and sponsor a survey of ordinary South Africans to see what's the biggest issue. Is it unemployment? Is it underinvestment? Is it corruption? Is it crime? Is it drugs? Is it people having the complete license to disrespect everything? At this stage, is it lockdown? Is it the fact that you can have a political rally of 2,000, but you can't have a funeral over 100? I don't know. Service. Or a church service. Tell me what your problems are. If Nandos wants to be about free speech, put a microphone in the hands of ordinary South Africans in the best and most representative way possible. And if you want that to happen and you want to go and have the chicken, you can do both. Phone the local owner, phone the brand manager, that new Ashley lady who's taken over and is now very worried about what Twitter has to say about Gareth van Onselen. Let her be very worried about what you have to say. Add to the conversation. There's an inclination in South Africa to get it exactly opposite. When Cele talks, and Cele talks about this better than anyone I know, when Cele talks about taking control over your life, finding solutions for your community, the government's not going to come and solve the police thing, so get a neighborhood watch going, get a gun if you need to, train yourself up, learn how to use it. That is good stuff at the practical level. But here we're talking about the battle of ideas. And at that level, the local insulated echo chamber thing's not going to work. The only thing that works is to use the products that you like and use your voice to pop the bubbles of nonsense that are trying to cut this country by melatonin into so many different pieces so that the big oaks can have a chow. Cut that out. Burst the bubble. Speak out. And, you know, there's various ways to do it. But I think in this particular issue, there's such a delicious opportunity to say, Nandos, come on, sponsor polling that shows what the lived experience is of actually most people. Are most people going to sleep worried about where the next plate of food's coming on? Or are most people worried about a terrible white man interrupting a terribly victimized black person who's like famous and has a good job, and then afterwards saying, okay, now it's your turn. I'm sorry I interrupted you and you spoke very well and please can we have it back on the show? Is that what's putting nightmares? or is it something to do with children being kidnapped? Is it something to do with once having a job and now joining the next million people in the unemployment queue? Let's figure out. Don't trust the previous RR surveys. Do another one. Let's see what people care about now.
Absolutely. Joe, I'm going to come to you, then Koketso to wrap up. Nzuzo, you'll have the final word. You know, Joe, there is something to be said here around the brittle spirits, as I like to refer to them, of these blavity blacks, the constant need to present black South Africans as the eternal victim, shadow boxing the boogeyman that is racism to eternity, the eternal apartheid that holds us back. And often the people who say this are some of the most privileged black voices amongst us, those who went to your universities, those who come from the two-parent households of two incomes and were able to send them to better off schools, those who've never worried about whether there is a plate of food on the dinner table at the end of the day, those who've never worried as to whether they've had to traverse through a field of shacks in order to get to their shack they call home on a sand dune somewhere in Cape Town. Shout out to France Grenier for that example. And really, those of us in the Black community who live in townships, for example, as I do, who face gunshots every evening in a sea, surrounded by a sea of fellow township residents who live that poverty experience. It's funny to me that it's not those South Africans who actually endure those situations who present themselves as the brittle, blabbity blacks. Often it's the more privileged amongst us who present themselves that way and get the mic to do so.
100%, Cele. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm actually looking for a tweet that I tweeted out. I mean, it was just after this whole thing happened with, right after Nandos announced that they were cutting their sponsorship with Gareth Cliff with immediate effect, by the way. And again, they didn't not one mention that, oh, we're cutting the funding because, or sponsorship because he's a racist. No, they didn't mention that at all. And I actually tweeted, that's the thing with cancel culture and what's happening is that even if Nandos does this, even if Nandos pulls the sponsorship, they're not going to accept it. And they didn't. Eusebius going out and tweeting, what is this statement by Nandos? What does this mean? What does that mean? Oh, Nandos doesn't have the balls to say this and that, and the rage continued. But basically what I wanted to say is, sorry, I'm looking for this tweet and I'm finding, I just want to get it because it's gonna feed into your point. Basically load shedding happened. Okay. Like literally the same, like I think an hour or two after Nandos pulled their plug on Gareth Cliff. So I tweeted and I said, basically, oh, wow. Here it is. Wait a second. I thought canceling Gareth Cliff would have solved our problems in South Africa. I hope Nandos has a generator. Keep up the good fight, people. Clearly, it's working. While we have other major problems in South Africa, unemployment, load shedding, economy going down the drain, there's people, like you said, who are, you, Cele, sitting in a township somewhere, and there's gang violence, But don't worry. The wokies have managed to take away the sponsorship of Nandos, so now you'll be fine. The gunshots will stop tomorrow. The electricity will be switched on forever from tomorrow. Everything's going to be just fine. And it just doesn't work that way because those, that racist grift that these wokies want to keep on pushing and say that racism is the biggest problem. It's not. We spoke earlier on this channel about human trafficking. That's another big problem. Trying to cancel Gareth Cliff is not going to solve the human trafficking in South Africa. It's not going to bring back the boys that have been abducted. It's not going to bring back food on ordinary South Africans' plates. That's exactly what Gareth Cliff was trying to say, is that there are going to be 1,000 people that are going to go to sleep worrying about where their next plate is going to come from, but only 5 are going to really worry about the racism in South Africa. So let the race grifters try what they want. They didn't win. I don't think they won. You can try and cancel Gareth all you like. He's not. It's impossible to do so. He's built a great platform, and people can have their opinions as much as they want. And I agree with Gabriel on this one as well. Pick up a phone, send a letter, do all that stuff. Do all of that. All right. Make your voices heard against the wokies and against Nandos. That is the best way to fight this. Gareth Cliff will be fine. And that's my final words on the topic.
Fellas, I'm going to move to final comments, not only final comments, but also letting us know what you're going to be doing, what's coming up on your particular channel in the upcoming weeks. Koketso, I'll begin with you in that regard. What can we expect on the Manpatria show?
Yeah, so over at Manpatria, I think we've all been, for various reasons, sort of a bit under the radar, but we're back. So catch our podcast tomorrow, I think episode 105. That's me, Dumo, along with Nzuzo, of course. In terms of what I'll be doing, I'm still having quite at the time of my life with my work schedule. So yeah, things have been a little bit tight, but that does not mean that I can't make the time to pick up the sniper rifle and shut down terrible opinions that affect you and I, and especially the coming generations after me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe to that particular extent, Nzuzo, I don't know what you will be up to in that part of the world at Manpatria. I just want to lump the two of you together. What are you looking to write or maybe even produce this week?
Yeah, man. As Koketso said, we're gonna be releasing our podcast tomorrow at 7:00 in the evening. So please watch that. We'll also be having a post podcast review, just to us, with the guests, with the viewers, just how they feel about the topics that we spoke about and any other topics that they would like to also want us to speak about, and if they want to also come onto the show and also have us speak with them, please can they join us. So yeah, on that front, it's gonna be a great a great place to be. I'm also thinking of producing my own show on Manpatria. This is going to be geared towards South African men, young men that I'm hoping to also bring onto the fore and just speak about what men in general have to face, particularly across the whole board, but particularly young men with the high unemployment rate, the lack of purpose, escapes, addictions, all that type of stuff. I'm hoping to produce that in the next coming weeks with the friend of mine, but also under the Manpatria band. And yeah, man, just pushing forward the word of liberty throughout South Africa. But yeah, man, just on that topic as well, in terms of like men as well, just going back to Mzuli, as a young black woman, I don't think she actually understands what young black men have to go with. Studies show that when a young black man does not have any job, does not have anything to do with his time, he tends to turn to crime, and he has a hard time finding love. You can only understand what that brings him to. That takes him to escapes. It takes him to addictions. It takes him to suicides. A growing rate of suicides amongst young men or men in general in South Africa is growing. That's not spoken. It's not spoken enough about. Growing. They always talk about how much gender-based violence is against women, but nonetheless, men are the ones that by far are the victims of crime in South Africa. All types of violent crimes, and we also have to take a stand against that. I'm not a men's rights activist. I'm just trying to put some balance into the discussion, and I hope that the podcast that I produce in the next coming weeks does that. But nonetheless, I think that going back to Mozilla, it's all about power, man. I've realized it's just all about power, and that's why you only see the outrage much from the elites. They don't know what unemployment is. They don't know what hunger is. They don't know what eating plants is. They've never ate a plant, so those are the type of people that you're dealing with. So whenever they have an outrage, it's just understand it. That's why it's even going to go after a couple of days. After a couple of days, it will just die down because they're just looking for another problem so that they can, make themselves. It's virtue signaling. It's always virtually signaling, and it's nothing more. They don't care about the issues. And I think that, as South African libertarians, as us or conservatives, let's not give a damn about them. They're a waste of time. I know that, they have some considerable power in terms of social media, but I think that as we can see that the ANC government is failing in its duties for South Africans, us on the ground are going to make a real change if we work together for better South Africa.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely, and we'll be looking forward to that one. I am a bit of an advocate for men myself, so I'll definitely be having a look at that content. I think it's sorely needed in this country. There's a definite need to have that conversation around how do we get South African men back into a position where they can provide the sort of leadership, the personal leadership in the family, and really leadership in the society that is sorely needed. I will be watching that with bated breath. Nzuzo, Khati, of course, one part of the trio at the Manpatria show. Kanthan, final word, and of course, I don't know if you're going to be writing, or are you writing, Kanthan? What can we expect this week? What are you looking at and focusing on this week? You're muted, Kanthan. Hang on. Let me just unmute you. Go ahead.
I haven't been putting out stuff into the public space for a while now, Cele, and mainly because I've been busy writing, and I've been working on a book which I'm hoping to have out by the end of the year, on the assumption that I can wrap up 30,000 words over the next week or so. But yeah, look, it's my kind of working title on it is How to Fix South Africa, an Owner's Manual. And I've pulled together a range of things that are simple, effective, cheap, that can be implemented by us as South Africans in order to get this country back on the road. I had a meeting with the publishers 2 weeks ago, and they said, "Man, you need more words in this thing." And because if someone's going to plonk down $280 for a book, you need to give them more pages. So I've got a task, and I said, no, I'm not short of ideas, and I'll give you another 30,000 words. And so I've got to bury that in the course of this week ahead, and I'm going to try my best to actually do that. So, fingers crossed. Let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. That is, of course, Kanthan Pillay, who Mlamuli was it Vezi, and said, I leave for an hour and Kanthan becomes Jesus. Shout out to you, Mlamuli. Thanks for watching. Kanthan Pillay, of course. Joe, dude, what can we expect from the Joe Emilio show?
Oh, fantastic content, ladies and gentlemen. Please subscribe to the Joe Emilio Show. Yeah, this week I am having, tomorrow actually, Gwen Ngwanya from DA, policymaker DA.
Nice.
So she's going to be on the show. Hopefully, it's not 100% confirmed. We keep on postponing because obviously DA is quite busy with election season and stuff. So hopefully I'll finally have her on the show tomorrow. But if not, it will be sometime this week. And yeah, that's the biggest guest I got this coming week. So please subscribe to my show. And once again, thank you, Cele, for having me on this show. Always enjoy being here. And it's great to see Koketso, Gabriel, Nzuzo, and Kanthan Pillay once again. Hope you guys have a great week. And everybody watching.
Excellento. That, of course, is Joe Emilio of the Joe Emilio podcast, the show, Joe Emilio Show. Shout out to Joe. Gabriel, last final word, brother. What can we expect from, firstly, the IRR this week? Secondly, the Daily Friend. Lastly, your podcast, Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree.
Thanks, Cele. Great chat. So from the IRR, our main campaign right now is to cancel the Command Council. Not into cancelling private actors, but pseudo dictators that are trying to tell you when to go to sleep and how to have a funeral. You can cancel them. We're trying to do it. We're going to do it. Our petition's been gaining ground. We've got many thousands. We're going to be launching off some lawyers' letters and building the paper trail for the next stage of that. We're also looking to, elections we're kind of bypassing. We went to the Constitutional Court to tell the Command Council's leader, of course, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or its Prime Minister, that she was ridiculous in trying to postpone the election. We won. Everybody gets to vote wisely. But we're looking at what comes after that, which is Parliament comes back to business. The last thing they were doing was the Employment Equity Act. It's going to be the first thing back on the table, most likely. That would take quotas, put them at the discretion of the Minister of Trade and Labour, and be able to write that into the private sector. So any business sector, he'll be able to say who gets to do what. That's not on. We're lobbying against that. Also looking potentially at some court action. Good, important campaign. Tag into that. You can sign into the petition to disband the Command Council, by the way, if you think that record low deaths and cases is good news that people should be talking about in this country. That's a thing that happened in this country this week. We got the lowest death and case record ever. No one's mentioned it. It's great news. If you think that's the kind of good news that doesn't equal a state of disaster, sign our petition. In terms of the Daily Friend, daily important stories you can check out in the Glencoe Farm murder case with Gary Simpson, who was caught on camera defending his life, why it is that the magistrate denied bail. That story should be coming out tomorrow. Important one to check out on the Daily Friend. Always good stories there. Me and the Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree, we shot a show today. We covered some of the same topics as we've done here. On Friday, we're going to be shooting, I don't think it's too early to say, with one young France Crenier, El Jefe, the supreme leader of the IRR, on his way into who knows where. and he's become a bit of a. He's listened to the Two Crickets a few times now, and really likes the show and has been spreading the good word. We appreciate that, and he wants to get on there, so we're going to have an exciting conversation about
Excellent.
State of the Nation and beyond. That's it.
And of course, that is a reminder to you, dear viewer. You've got to support civil society organizations that are doing the work of fighting for your freedoms and your liberty. So make sure you go head on over to the IRR website and become a friend of the IRR. A small monthly contribution keeps guys like Gabriel, Franz, and many others at the forefront of defending your liberty. Shout out to the IRR, of course, for the excellent work. Have I covered everybody? Yes, I have. And I've lost someone. I've lost Nzuzo, but that's also quite fine because I now say goodbye and thank you to all of my guests who were on the show. And thank you for watching this broadcast. It has been a marathon broadcast, well over 2.5 hours. If you like this long format, please let me know. This could be a more regular thing on the for Liberty and Friends. It's the only long format show that I have. Ordinarily, the BDL shows no more than 30 minutes. So this is the only long format show that I have. With that being said, thank you for watching. I'll see you on Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty Show. I am in Cape Town for the next 3 weeks. There's lots of things I'll be filming and shooting down here, including finishing that special feature on the effects of lockdown on the tourism industry. So that's coming quite soon. You need to finish filming for that. And this Wednesday, I bring you the new kid on the block here in Cape Town. How will they do? That's the Cape Independence Party, of course. They're contesting elections down here. Who are these people calling for Cape Independence, and what does that look like when they then run for election? So I'll bring you that on this Wednesday's episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show at 7 p.m. With that being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you on Wednesday. And a reminder, you thought I wouldn't say it. A reminder, never trust a commie.